Hello, everybody. Oh, I'm a little bit far up some. Oh, my page down is stuck. There we go. That's the key bind for my angry face. For some reason it was stuck down. Got stuck. But anyway, I am here, and today is a special Saturday night. Tonight we are reading A Kiss of Death and Rebirth by Mr. Brogath. And his his Twitch is linked in my stream title. I changed it. And then also, if you would like to purchase the book, I do have a link in the pinned comments where you can get it on Amazon. But anyway, we're going to read that here in a second. We're going to switch to my campfire, and we won't have any background music going on. But, yeah, tonight we're going to read this book, and if we have time, which we probably will, I think we probably will only take a couple hours to read this, we will play Final Fantasy XIV, and tomorrow we're going to do Art of Belinda Sunday. I'm going to have a stream ending soon, so I have it, I have the sky, done. I just need to draw myself in my dragon form the way I would like to. So we're going to have to work on that. And I already have, a Be Right Back screen that I use, my little side dragon commercial. So we're going to keep that. And then we'll play Final Fantasy XIV afterwards. Again, I feel like it's going to take us the next couple weeks to finish the ending soon screen because, yeah, I haven't even sketched my pose. I got the sky down a really long time ago. So I'm on stream until I get some commissions or something like that. I'm going to be working on my own assets. I need to redo my Twitch panels and make them a little bit snazzier, that sort of thing. Alright, so we're going to switch over to the reading ASMR. And we'll pause my music. And I'm going to get rid of my wings. Just cuz. And make sure you can hear my campfire sound. Alright. So, I got the title image right there. Let me move over just a little bit more. Maybe make this up bigger. There we go. I need a little book to hold, but it's hard when, you permanently got one arm up and one arm down, so. Alright, so this is A Kiss of Death and Rebirth. I know it's been a while since we read anything from this series, I don't know. And then anyway, last time we read this, we read A Kiss of Light and Flame. The whole series is called Tales of Love and Magic. So Mr. Brogath is author of the Pantech Chronicles also. He has a Liberation Saga that you can get via Patreon or any of some of the other serial platforms. There we go. The serial novel platforms. He also has a Discord if you're interested in keeping up with all his writing and things like that. I do not have a Discord because I cannot keep up with anybody's Discord, let alone my own, so. And then he's also author of the Detective Trigger series. And so, yeah, he's currently working on, the second book of the Liberation Saga. And there's going to be a spin-off of the Tales of Love and Magic series. Kind of almost like a prequel. So, alright, so we're going to read A Kiss of Death and Rebirth. Let me get a drink real quick before we start. Oops. I accidentally made myself smaller again. There we go. Celeste studied her reflection in the mirror for a moment and took inventory. Even though she was only 24, she was beginning to look like a lady much older. The way she felt taken into account, much, much older. Still, her raven hair and dull green eyes remained, at least for now. Her more delicate features, almost that of a doll, were in some ways emphasized. She could only remain active a few hours a day now before growing tired, and the spring sunlight weighed on her like a heavy blanket. The summer would surely be worse. If a necromancer could estimate one thing with great accuracy, it was the lifespan of any living thing. She expected she had a few good years left at her current rate of using her magic. Unlike more recent necromancers, she would not enjoy a long life. Yet, compared to some of the ancient necromancers of times past, she was already quite old. Not that she had anyone to compare herself to anymore. All her peers were long dead, and like some of the other forms of magic in the world, this magical art would likely die with her. It already had, for some. There were no more blood mages, and hadn't been for nearly 100 years, for example. If she only knew of one which left in Arthurus, where they once ruled in abundance, kept safe by their awesome destructive power. However, this witch emerged nearly 200 years after they were thought to be extinct. She'd always expected witches were different somehow, gaining their powers of fire from the land. Perhaps through the earth beneath them, or perhaps through some of the unique flora that exists in the surrounding area of that city. They were a secretive people and were always quite isolated. Celeste regretted that she would likely never have the chance to study them or speak with the one remaining witch. Then again, without meaning to, that witch had caused her enough trouble already. Though it was her lover that intrigued Celeste the most, the Holy Maiden. At least, that's how she was previously titled. Given somewhat recent events in that city, it wasn't clear if her church-appointed title remained, even though the city remained in favorable relations with the church. The power of the Holy Maiden seemed almost a different side of the coin of her own power. A necromancer could repair a body after the soul had gone, and the Holy Maidens could do the same, but only so long as the soul remained. No necromancer in her memory had ever bound a soul back to a living body, though it had been studied for generations. As one might expect, such a feat was greatly desired. If a soul could be bound to a new body, immortality, or at least in a manner of speaking, was possible. Soon, this would be a dream scholars could document of a time long past. Like this holy woman and her lover, the witch, she was the last of her kind. Any hopes of evolving these powers would die with her, and even though Celeste was a dedicated scholar, her skill in necromancy was underwhelming, a disappointment, one might even say. Though there are many misconceptions or outright misinformation about necromancers, likely more than any other type of magic. Necromancers received a poor reputation because of the actions of their early, powerful ancestors. Necromancers can manipulate the dead, yes. However, it always costs a piece of the necromancer's life. You could see how this would be unwise to do very often. Yet, seduced by power, the ancient necromancers abused this. Although they did not live to a traditional human's old age, they were powerful when willing to use their powers freely. Celeste finished applying her daily routine of makeup. She wasn't fond of the look at first, but as her skill with applying it improved, she warmed up to her new look more and more. It was likely the people who lived in the capital that would find her appearance to be dark and mysterious, if not a bit delicate. That would be the case, of course, if she ever ventured outside the giant, empty home she'd been given, and the long-dead garden that was once so vibrant and beautiful. She just couldn't bring herself to tend it anymore, though she was sure to save some of the Xanthias flowers left to her by her childhood friend. Thinking of her, Celeste felt a pain hard for her to swallow. It had been years now since they last met, but how she missed her. She tended to the garden for as long as she could manage, so she could remember her. Violet was her name. It fit that they named her after flowers because of how much she'd loved them. Violet was one necromancer who had never used her powers. What would she look like now if she were still alive? It was a question Celeste dare not ponder, lest her sorrow drain what little energy she had left for the day. Even though it would sap a considerable amount of her remaining life force, she needed to attempt making another golem. She only knew what she observed as a child and explanations overheard between one older necromancer to another. And it was simply not practiced often. The art of making a golem was already nearly a lost one, and few from her generation could make a respectable one. Celeste was not among them. Her first golem, several years past, had gone berserk almost immediately and nearly killed her. She had to chase it halfway across the kingdom in order to deactivate it, which was not nearly as fun as it might sound. Not in the least. The second golem, she'd at least figured out how to make it without the bloodlust. Rather, it hadn't made it long enough to find out, since only a few steps later it collapsed harmlessly to the ground. It was then that Celeste discovered a necromancer should use something living to create their golem, or at least not long dead. She used a rabbit to create her fourth golem, which was a slightly less traumatic and harrowing experience, but not more productive. She'd been thinking of a fish she'd seen earlier that morning, and the rabbit took on more of the qualities of a fish than it had from its origin. Unable to breathe oxygen, the poor thing didn't last long. Celeste had spent a long time studying between attempts and was confident she could create something at least humanoid this time. It didn't have to be spectacular, and she was certain it wouldn't be. Spectacular in its failure, perhaps. But she hoped it could help her around the house. Somewhat inconvenient to always need to be ordering a thing about, but as her life drew closer to an end, it would become necessary. A golem took more life to create than a simple animation because they should last longer. These attempts were becoming counterproductive in their catastrophe, and if this attempt failed, she would simply petition her captors to provide her a servant. This was not an appealing choice. Celeste valued solitude in life and preferred the company of plants and the silent air that moved through her expansive home. Not as much as books, of course. Celeste loved books, and when she wasn't performing her mandatory service to the crown, she loved to read until her eyes could remain open no longer. Yes, this was the best choice, even with all the risk. A golem could retrieve her books, and, if she performed the art exceptionally well, they may even organize her shelves or perform other basic tasks. Brewing a cup of tea was certainly on Celeste's list of hope for skills within its ability. Even the most impressive golems ever recorded were impressive only in their functions. At the end of things, it was still a hollow, lifeless husk, performing thoughtless, unquestioning service for its creator. The idea struck her, and she was amused. If a living thing was necessary, why not a plant? Given how the thoughts of the fish had morphed her rabbit golem into something that was almost completely fish, and nearly nothing rabbit, it could work. Celeste retrieved one of the potted purple leucanthus flowers and placed it in the center of the room. After taking a lengthy break to recover her strength, even from such a minor task, she contemplated how she might imagine it. A human, for certain. She'd seen maids from the palace, and they were easy to imagine. Even their mannerisms were all similar and simple to document within one mind. That would be it, a palace maid. That's really what she needed, after all. She held out her hands and concentrated after taking a good, long look at the flower, then closing her eyes. She quickly realized what a terrible idea this was and wished she thought it more through. When she looked at this flower, the only thing she could imagine was the girl from many years ago. A sadness and sense of nostalgia overtook her mind. Her memory was clearer than it had ever been. She could see Violet smile. She could feel her hand as they walked through a field of flowers together. She could feel her warmth and the roughness of her fingers, calloused from the time spent gardening. She could smell the scent of earth and flowers on her skin and in her hair, just as she remembered it. She reached up, wiping a tear from her eye, but it was only a temporary fix. Soon they came in plenty. Yet, she didn't want to open her eyes, even as she felt the process completing. It was as though she'd been given a chance to return to better days, and she wished she could live within them forever. If she could undo her mistakes, she would give anything. Alas, no mages existed, or ever had, who could manipulate time. Her dream would remain a dream, and a regret to follow her for her premature demise. Less than she had deserved, that was for sure. Celeste opened her eyes and immediately fell onto the floor from the shock. Her heart raced, and her eyes darted up and down her creation. This wasn't possible. More than impossible. There was no explanation for what stood before her. With Celeste's skill, a stalk with vines that could pour tea and retrieve books was her most ambitious goal. Yet, before her stood a woman, so perfect that it would have meant an insult to call her human. So flawless that it made Celeste's heart nearly beat from her chest and nearly stop all at once. But the moment of pride and her triumph was short-lived as the pain emerged. She bore a striking resemblance to Violet, only older in appearance. Different hair. Violet had brown hair, almost like the soil she spent so much time in, and light blue eyes. This girl. Her eyes were a deep purple, almost pink color, and her hair was as white as snow. Her beauty captivated Celeste. She'd forgotten about the purpose of the spell, forgotten why she'd cast it in the first place, forgotten who she was, at least for the moment. "Hello, my dear. Can you hear me?" she finally asked. The girl turned her head slowly, locking eyes, then nodded. Celeste smiled, allowing herself a moment to be pleased. She'd finally gotten it right after all. This would have been her last attempt before giving up forever, but it's better late than never. She nearly told the girl not to be afraid, but caught herself before she did. After all, this creature only looked like a beautiful woman. But that was as far as it went. It was still an emotionless husk. "I will name you Amaranthine," she said. That's the end of chapter 1. We'll get set, then we'll continue with chapter 2. Chapter 2. Amaranth, the girl tried. Celeste froze in place. This wasn't right, was it? None of her previous golems had anything resembling an ability to speak. As a child, she remembered only the most skilled necromancers creating humanoid golems capable of speech. Even then, they required training, like a bird. So soon? It shouldn't be possible. Amaranthine, she said, looking to Celeste, who was trying to remain composed. "Yes, had I known you could speak, I'd have given you a shorter name. My apologies, dear. I'm your creator. You may call me Celeste." Amaranthine looked up at her and began crying. Was this because Celeste had been crying during the creation? That must be it. This isn't emotion. It's only a residual of her own emotions. An energy at a place that would soon fade. "Why?" Amaranthine asked, touching her face and looking at her wet fingers. "Humans cry when they are sad. I remembered something that made me very sad when I was making you. It should pass soon. You need not worry. After all, you will not be burdened with emotion as we humans are. You only have your task, and you will be content with performing it. I envy you, really," Celeste said. "Sad?" Amaranthine asked, pointing to Celeste. "Sad?" she repeated. "Me? Oh, yes. I'm sad right now, but that's all right. I will be better soon, too, like you. I may get sad sometimes. That will not impact your responsibilities as my golem, so there's no need for you to recognize my sadness, only my commands." Sad. The white-haired girl looked down at her wet fingers, wiping her eyes again. She stood up and walked over to Celeste, putting her arms around her gently. "No more sad. I am here." This paralyzed Celeste with fear. What had she done? This wasn't supposed to happen, no matter how great the necromancer, and no matter how the spell was cast. This was impossible. More leftover emotion from herself? It must be. There was no other explanation, even remotely within reason. Her affection toward Violet in her memories was causing this, influencing this golem's short-term behavior to mimic what a human might do for someone they wanted to comfort. Nothing more and nothing less. Yet, Celeste couldn't help but raise her arms to embrace the girl in return. "I know you don't understand what you're doing, but thank you, Amaranthine. It's been many years since someone has embraced me this way and tried to comfort me in times of sadness. You are a good golem indeed." The girl let go and took a step back, smiling. "Good golem!" Celeste giggled. "Yes, good golem, but very naked golem. Come, let's get you a dress." "Naked. Bad." "No, naked not bad. No dress." Celeste fought back her smile, rubbing her chin. "I'm sorry. I'm afraid I'm not sure how to explain this. Naked is not bad or good, really. You're beautiful in every way, but I want you to wear a dress so you look like me. Is that all right?" Amaranthine nodded enthusiastically. "You are pretty." Celeste stifled another laugh, covering her mouth with her sleeve. Well, I used to be. I'm not sure others would agree anymore, sweet girl. No, you are pretty. You are a sweet girl. Celeste could feel the pull back into her sorrow again. Even if this golem was only mimicking her own words, how wonderful it was to hear someone speak to her so kindly, even if they were lies, even if they were empty and without intention. No, 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 no. Sad? No sad. No more sad. Sweet girl. Pretty girl. I'm sorry. I need to think for a moment. In the meantime, let's get you dressed. Here, have a look. Celeste wiped her eyes and guided Amaranthine by the hand to her wardrobe. What about this black dress? It looks just like mine, she said, smiling. You'll look pretty in it. Amaranthine reached for it, but stopped just short of grabbing it, biting her lip and looking to the side. Is something wrong? Celeste asked, tilting her head. This one? She asked, tugging at the sleeve of the white dress. Celeste hadn't worn that dress in years. It reminded her of Violet. She had always worn white, while Celeste almost always wore black. Both were considered strange for it. Then, a realization hit Celeste again, sharp and sudden. This was impossible. Was another residual memory manifesting itself before it faded completely? No, that excuse was wearing thin. It had been several minutes since her creation by now. Any residual emotion projected onto the golem should have faded. Why was she displaying a preference? Not possible. All right, I never wear it, so you can have it as a gift. It's yours forever. Amaranthine clutched it to her chest, smiling, before slipping it on over her head. Well, there are more clothes you should probably wear under that, but we'll worry about that tomorrow. This is good enough for today. Yours forever, Amaranthine said, pointing to herself. You mean, Celeste said, afraid to say more. Me. Yours forever. Celeste put her hands over her mouth and stood quietly, unsure of what to say. Sad? Amaranthine asked, tilting her head. Don't want me. Celeste reached out and took her by the hand. No, that's not it. I mean, yes, that I'm sad. I'm sorry. One thing at a time. Yes, I am sad, but not because of your offer. I remember things sometimes that make me sad. Your offer to be mine forever, well, it's very sweet. It's just that I created you to serve me, and it forever bound your life to mine. I'm afraid I wasn't able to give you a choice, and I'm sorry for that, too. No, 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 no sorry, no sad, yours forever, she said, hugging Celeste. She didn't return her hug this time. Instead, she only felt guilty. She thought this was a great triumph, that she'd finally succeeded at something in her life, succeeded as a necromancer and, in some ways, as a human being. A servant with no feelings or choice was a golem. Having feelings and desires made her a slave. Can I have? Amaranthine asked, interrupting her thoughts. Can you? The dress? Oh, yes, yours forever, Celeste said, nodding. No, that, she said, holding up one of the other Lysanthius flowers. You like that? Celeste asked. This wasn't too outrageous, all things considered. Well, the liking part was, but not the fact that she was drawn to it. She had made her from one, after all. Like, pretty, Amaranthine agreed, nodding enthusiastically. Mine forever? She asked. Yours forever, Celeste said, nodding along with her. Yours forever, Amaranthine repeated, pointing to herself. Celeste smiled. Even though it was filling her with emotions, most she'd not felt in many years, this was exhausting. Help me to the garden? I'll show you the way. I'm sorry. I get very tired late in the day. It's the reason I made you. Amaranthine, help! She shouted, running over and standing in front of Celeste. Help! Celeste giggled again. Well, how about you hold out one of your hands? I will hold it, and you can use some of your strength to help me walk easier. Hand! Help! She repeated, holding out her hand for Celeste to take. Celeste took it, and then they both walked to the garden where Celeste sat in a chair. This is better. Thank you, she said, letting go of her hand. Pretty? Amaranthine asked, pointed to the garden. Celeste smiled. In a way, like me, I suppose. It was once pretty, but no longer. I became too ill to care for it properly. Not pretty. Amaranthine disagreed, shaking her head. Garden? Not pretty. I make pretty? Celeste giggled. She'd done more today than in any day she could remember. At first she worried it might exhaust her even earlier than usual, but she felt somewhat invigorated. Very well, yes. Someday I will teach you how to care for the garden, and you may take care of it. Amaranthine shook her head. No. No, now. No. 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 Take care of it. No teach. Celeste narrowed her eyes, leaning forward, looking closely at Amaranthine's expression. Are you saying that you know how to care for this garden? Already, you mean? She smiled, bobbing her head happily. She was so cute. She really thought she could take care of this garden. She'll be surprised how much work there is and how much you have to learn to restore such a thing. Still, it was on the brink of completely dying out. There was no harm in letting her play in it. Okay, I will watch you. Watch me, Amaranthine repeated. She walked over and retrieved gloves from a bench nearby, sliding them on. Getting on her hands and knees, she began weeding. Celeste had no more simple explanations that could easily explain this away. She had exhausted them all fully. She was quite certain that, at no point during the creation of this golem, did she think about gardening or how to do it. She thought about flowers, but nothing like this. And yet, she was so efficient and familiar, quickly identifying the weeds from the flowers. She'd even avoided herbs in the corner. At last, she had passed over other plants that Celeste didn't recognize. Did you miss some weeds over there? She asked, pointing at the plant she'd passed over. Good for energy, less tired, more pretty, she exclaimed, looking up and smiling. Not only could she not make an excuse for this, but this was utterly impossible in every sense of the word. A golem could never be created with information their creator didn't already possess. Was she connected to her somehow, and perhaps she'd just forgotten about this herb that helped with energy? Surely that was the case. It was in her garden, after all. She must have known it at some point, just forgot. How did she know it without them discussing it, or without her thinking about it during the creation? Amaranthine tossed the weeds over the wall of the garden, dusting her clothes off. Water? Celeste nodded. Water in the morning. I will show you a well nearby that you can collect water from without running into other people. Celeste stood up, but did so a bit too quickly. She felt faint and stumbled, steadying herself on her chair, before even that failed with her. Amaranthine rushed over, catching her before she hit the ground. She stopped smiling, leaning close to Celeste as she held her. She looked into her eyes and slowly drew her face closer, touching their lips together. Celeste gasped, completely shocked, and pushed her away, causing Amaranthine to lose her grip and dropped her a short distance onto the ground. No! Amaranthine put her hands over her mouth. No? Bad? Mad? Bad! No, dear, no. It's just that very special when you did. And I'm afraid you don't understand what you're doing. It's all right, really. You will learn what these things mean in time. You were just created. Please don't worry. I'm not angry with you. Amaranthine shook her head from side to side violently. No, I dropped. Hurt you, mad. No, sweet girl, it's all right, I promise. Not mad. I'm sorry for scolding you. Despite Celeste's assurance, tears streamed down Amaranthine's face. I'm sorry. Without another word, she ran out of the garden. It's the end of chapter 2. Get another drink and we'll continue and make sure we're staying hydrated. Okay, we're going to start reading chapter 3 here in just a second. There's a total of, let's see, how many chapters are there? Well, there's an epilogue. So we're going to add that to it. There are only 14 chapters plus an epilogue, so 15 in all. So we're already like 3 chapters in. Probably won't take too long. I kind of read at a fast pace when I narrate, but then again, I also narrate, like dramatically. But I like it. I like the more emotional part to it. Okay. Chapter 3. Amaranthine ran into the forest behind Celeste's home and continued running for nearly an hour. By now, darkness had fallen and she was hopelessly lost. Even if she had turned back, she'd never remember the way in the dark. Instead, she continued walking. She'd wished she could explain how she felt and that she understood. She had a special connection with the woman, like they'd known each other for a lifetime. This wasn't the fleeting feelings of some lifeless doll. She knew what she meant. She just couldn't explain it, and it frustrated her to no end. She needed to learn the words. Something was wrong with the connection between her brain and her mouth. She spotted a campfire up ahead and watched it from afar. A single man sat in front of the fire, patiently turning a skinned rabbit over the flame. Suddenly realizing how hungry she was, she could smell it now, so far away. She couldn't help herself but to sneak closer and closer. At last, she was within 20 feet of the man. He was a large man, muscled and without a shirt. It was easy to see the many scars that covered his body. Something about them fascinated her. You know, I can hear you breathing heavily all the way from here, even over this fire. You're not very good at stealth, so I'm going to assume you don't mean me any harm. I'm actually pretty bored, so I wouldn't mind the company. Can't say I'm thrilled to share the rabbit, but I'll consider it payment for the conversation, he said, turning to look at her. His bearded face contrasted with the delicate features of Celeste more than she imagined any human being could do. He was the embodiment of the masculine, and yet the way he spoke was so soft and kind. Conversation? She asked, stepping out of the bushes. His eyes widened. Sorry, I wasn't expecting a beautiful woman to just appear at my campsite. To be honest, I lied before. I thought you probably were here to kill me, and I was hoping to draw you out. Why in the world are you here alone? She said, walking away. No, it's all right. You're safe here with me, but not everyone is like me. Now that you're here, I'd feel more comfortable if you stayed a while. You're hungry, right? Hungry. Right, she said, drooling as she reached for the rabbit. I don't know you well, so I'm sorry if you find anything I say insulting. Does someone care for you? Do you just have trouble with speech, or are you... He sighed. You know what, never mind. I'll learn about you through regular conversation. But since you're a young woman visiting a wandering warrior like me, it looks like I'll have to pay extra. Here, you can have the whole thing. He smiled, pulling it off the skewer and dropping it into a wooden plate. Sorry, no silverware here like you're probably used to. You'll have to be like me for now. Just eat the thing with your hands. She yanked the plate from his hands and took several steps back before sitting on the ground and violently tearing the meat from the bones. He observed her for a moment. Looks like it's been forever since you ate last. No last. Yes, forever. First eat, she said, eyeing him cautiously as she continued to eat. As in, you've never eaten before? He scratched his chin. Well, these types of things have a way of showing up in my life, so I'm not even going to pretend I'm surprised. You're not one of the necromancers I've heard about, nor do you seem like one of their creations. You are some kind of new forest creature, right? Some kind of different magical being. But we're awfully close to the capital. He scratched his head again, pondering the choices. Could it be that you are injured and have trouble speaking? Trouble speaking, she repeated, nodding. Does someone take care of you? She shook her head. Take care of someone? All right, you take care of someone. Did you run away because that someone wasn't kind to you? More? Please more? She asked, holding up the plate of clean bones. He sighed, reaching into his pouch. This was in case I failed to get a kill today, but I've been without food for a few days before, so I'm not concerned. Have my bread, too. She hesitated a moment before snatching the bread from his hand. This time she smiled. I hurt, she said. You hurt? Or because they hurt you, or you hurt someone else? I hurt someone... She touched her lips. Ate all their food? He asked, attempting a joke. She furrowed her brow, tapping her lips. Oh, you kissed them. That hurt them? Kissed, she exclaimed. She didn't understand why it took so long to remember the word, but it felt familiar, just like all the words she was learning. Each time she heard a new one, it was as though it were on the tip of her tongue all along. Sorry, but how did that hurt them, he asked. Hurt her. Feelings? Not body. Feels sad? Mad. Mad and sad? He rubbed his chin again. Do you mind if I venture a guess? She shook her head. Yes. Your lady friend probably didn't want to feel like she was taking advantage of you. Maybe she was like me and hasn't really figured you out yet. If you're a forest creature and you just met people today, it would be hard to communicate your feelings. Were you born today? She nodded enthusiastically. Born today. Born today. First food, but... He was almost excited for a moment that he'd finally figured it all out, but he could tell that she was about to complicate his understanding again. Memories. I learn and remember. I already know. Lived before? Never before? Sad? This is more complicated than a man like me is going to understand, I'm afraid. But we'll keep trying. Maybe this is helping you at least. It doesn't sound to me like you were being abused by someone. Maybe you misread their reaction. Maybe they weren't mad or sad, just startled. Humans need time to get used to things, just like you're learning things. Kissing is something humans take a while to do, usually. They do it when they love one another. Love! She exclaimed again. Another word she'd been searching desperately for that felt like it was on the tip of her tongue the entire time. Love! Not confused. Me. I understand. She said I didn't understand. I understand love. The word. Didn't know the word. Your speech is improving just during our conversation. I wouldn't let the frustration get to me. I think you'll be a quick learner, he said, closing his pack and setting it aside, slapping his hands on his knees. All right, I'm sorry for forgetting my manners. I'm Blaine Grave, originally from Arthurus. Now just a student of the world. Do you have a name? Amaranthine, she said, smiling as she finished her bread, Bane's silent dismay. Well, now that sounds like a name given to you. By your lady? My lady. Hers forever, she pointed to her dress. Mine forever. She gave you a beautiful name and a beautiful dress. Both suit you well. No wonder you fell so quickly for such a kind woman. Kind, Amaranthine agreed. I'm going to call you Amara, though. Is that all right? We're like old friends already. Hey, if you were born today and we only met the other woman, then I'm the second oldest friend you had. She nodded quickly. Friend Blaine. Well, don't worry, Amara. There are bad men that travel this way, but none of them will bother you so long as you're with me. You're not bad, man. Why here? She asked. Oh, boring story. I witnessed something in Arthurus that changed the way I think about magic. I saw a witch and a holy maiden come to love each other. My entire life, I believed that witches were the worst evil, but it turns out at least some of that was a cruel lie. If I found out from someone I once worked for that there was a necromancer being held here. Like the witches, I already dismissed them as evil monsters and extinct. But truth is becoming fiction, and fiction is becoming true. I wanted to make sense of it all. I want to learn the truth for myself instead of just believing powerful people interested in protecting their own power. She smiled and pointed at Blaine. I will protect you. Oops. I touched my mouse. He smiled. Well, you're the first woman to offer to protect me. Too bad you've already fallen for somebody else. His attempt at a joke again, falling flat as before. I'll tell you what. Let's grab my axe and you can show me how you swing it. Hit that tree over there. He retrieved his axe from a stump, handing it to her. She hesitated, but took it from him, eyeing it suspiciously. All right, he said, leading her to the tree. Hold it like this, and then swing it like this, hard as you can, right into the side of the tree. He guided her hands, gently showing her the motion before taking a few steps back. Whenever you're ready. She studied the axe and the tree for a moment, narrowing her gaze on it as though it was the strangest thing she'd seen. Hurt tree? He laughed. Oh, I doubt you'll hurt it too much. It'll be all right. Besides, it's already dead. Had my eye on it for tomorrow's firewood. She nodded, turning back toward the tree. She drew the axe back as far as she could, then awkwardly turned her head to Blaine. Like this? Like that. Now just swing it forward, but make sure you hit the tree. Don't let it throw you off balance and make you fall. If you fall, just make sure you don't fall on the axe. Okay, she said, nodding. The swing fell, but so did the tree. It was as though there was no tree there at all. The explosion echoed through the forest, and the power of the swing drew Amaranthine several steps forward before she let the axe head rest in the dirt, steadying herself. Oh no! Bad? She asked when she saw Blaine's shocked expression. He looked at her, then at the tree several times. This delicate young girl, so slight in frame, should have only buried that axe an inch in, even if she was skilled with it. The tree was dead, but it wasn't rotten or hollow. It wasn't much softer than a living tree. It would have taken him many strokes, even with his skilled hands and muscular arms. After the moment of shock had passed, Blaine laughed without holding it back. Rather than feeling upset or afraid, he was pleased that he encountered someone extraordinary so soon. The world was really such a big place that it turned out he didn't know well at all. Ha-ha? What ha-ha? She asked, pointing to her mouth. Laughter. Laughing. I'm happy is all. You want to know something? Know what? She asked, smiling. I think you could protect me after all. New plan. We'll protect each other. Let's get a little sleep, and tomorrow I'll take you back to the capital to find your lady. She owes me a meal at the very least, if I bring you back. Is that a deal, Amara? Amaranthine grinned. Deal. It's the end of chapter 3. Ooh, I had to take a sip. I was going to do it with my right hand. I was holding the book with my left, but I keep re-injuring the tendon in my thumb, so I can't pick the cup up again. Fun times, man. I think I'm going to have to start wearing the splint all day again if I want it to fix itself. Alright, chapter 4. The next morning, Blaine awoke to the sound of the girl grunting, swinging the axe through the air repeatedly, just as he'd shown her the night before. My goodness, girl, didn't you sleep? No sleep, no tired, she replied. You mean you didn't sleep? At all? Blaine asked, rubbing the sleep from his own eyes. He grabbed a shirt that he'd left up to dry, slipping it on, securing his sword belt. Food? She asked, looking disappointed already. The food is all gone, Amara. You ate it, he said, shrugging. Your lady will owe me breakfast. Funny? She asked. He grinned. Well, if you have to ask, probably not. Maybe. Ha! She tried and failed miserably. I wish I could keep you around, Amara. You're much better company than the people I used to spend my days around. I promise you that. I can protect you, she said, pointing to him and smiling. Help her and protect her? I will protect her, too. I'm hers forever. He walked over to him, put his arm over her shoulder. Well, you can't protect everyone, but how about I find a more suitable weapon for you and teach you how to use it? I don't need to move on soon, and I plan on hanging around the capital a while anyway. Friend, she shouted, a little too loudly, hugging him. It hurt. Friend, he said, rubbing his side, but give me a couple weeks at least. Maybe I'll need to have it made, but hopefully I can find someone. I know a blacksmith in the capital. I'll go see him after I get you home. I remember home, but you can come, she said, pointing to the path she'd walked, now much clearer than it was before under the cover at night. Blaine nodded, happy this wouldn't be as difficult as he worried it would be. This girl was more intelligent than she appeared, but still naive enough to be taken advantage of. He'd have to keep a close eye on her until she was home again. Someone's forever? She asked, pointing to Blaine. He laughed, shaking his head. It's sweet of you to ask, but I'm afraid not. I don't meet many people in my travels now, and the life of a wandering swordsman will not be appealing to many. But I'm happy now. I enjoy being alone, but that might change later. You never know. Not sad alone? Peaceful. Quiet. Free. These are things I never had until now. They're new to me. All good things too, right? Good things too. Not me. Love being with Celeste, she said, nodding along as they walked. Hers forever. Blaine only smiled and nodded. Oh, Celeste? Celeste made me. Blaine wasn't given the time needed to ponder this latest revelation before spotting a figure up ahead. At this distance, appeared it were trying to hide from them. He snapped his arm in front of Amara, putting his other hand on his sword. Hello, traveler. Do you need help? There was no answer. Amaranthine gasped, running toward the figure. Help! Blaine, Celeste! Help, Celeste! Blaine ran with her, but couldn't keep up. She'd already closed the distance before he made it halfway. Celeste! Celeste! No, no, no! She cried, cradling her body in her arms. Blaine slowed when he caught up to her, approaching the woman cautiously. Was she dead? Her face was so pale, but her limbs swung freely when Amara moved her. She wasn't dead, or hadn't been dead for long. Silly girl, Celeste said, slowly opening her eyes, reaching up and wiping a tear for Amaranthine's face. If I were dead, you'd be dead too. Your life is forever bound to mine. I promise I'll live it as long as I can. She looked up at Blaine. Blaine! Friend! Amaranthine said, snuffling. Celeste narrowed her eyes. I will warn you, warrior. Pay no heed to my appearance, for I am a necromancer of power far beyond what you can comprehend. If you've harmed my Amaranthine... Blaine took a step back, raising his hands in the air. No, no, no! Blaine is nice. Blaine is good. He is my friend. Celeste continued glaring at him for another moment, her teeth clenched before relaxing. Blaine gave me food, meat, bread, showed me how to hit trees hard with an axe. Good friend. Second longest friend. He said he will teach me to protect you. Yours forever. I want to help and protect. Blaine smiled, but didn't want to test his luck now against someone he knew nothing about. For all he knew, she could rip his soul from his chest in an instant and make his body a lifeless husk before he could even draw his sword. Or maybe she couldn't do anything at all, considering her state. He didn't particularly want to find out. Wait, you're not... Are you that, Blaine? Celeste asked, pulling up against Amaranthine's arm to sit up further, hoping for a better look. Blaine Grave, he said. What on earth are you doing here? To see if you were real. I want to see how many stories are lies and how many are true. So, you see you were lied to then, about magic? Blaine nodded. I do, and I don't intend to repeat my mistakes. I also know that master swordsmen from other kingdoms will have skills I can learn to better my sword as I travel. Celeste relaxed. It seems my information wasn't exactly reliable either. Her eyes relaxed, closed again, and she went limp in Amaranthine's arms. Blaine! Help! Help! It's all right, Amara. I think she's just exhausted and she's passed out. Let's take her back to your home and put her to bed. I'll stay a while. I don't enjoy entering a lady's home without permission, but I'll have you plead for forgiveness on my behalf later. Amaranthine nodded and picked Celeste up. She'd forgotten just how far she'd ran. Celeste must have come all this way looking for her, and after she was so exhausted. A wave of guilt rushed over her, and she hung her head as they walked. Really, Blaine insisted. She was out looking for you all night, so it's normal that she's tired. Amaranthine shook her head. Not just tired. Tired before. Always tired. Blaine nodded sympathetically. Once they arrived, Amaranthine took her and laid her on her bed. Blaine, I'm not hungry anymore. You eat. Really? But you were starving before. Besides, I can wait. I don't want to go rummaging through your house. It's only been 2 days since I ate. When she's awake, I'll head into the city. Celeste reached out and tugged at Amaranthine's dress, smiling. You were hungry because you were so far from me. Without me nearby to share my life force with you, you need to eat like a human. More. You must never stray far from me for more than a full day, or much farther than you did last night. Understood? I'm sorry, Celeste. I shouldn't have run, Amaranthine said, clasping her hand. My, your speech has improved dramatically since yesterday. Perhaps I should employ this man as your tutor, she said, smiling at both. I'm just glad not to have your ire still, my lady, Blaine said, bowing slightly. You had every chance to take advantage of Amaranthine in her current state. I dare say many would have, and you had plenty of opportunity to kill me if that's what you're here for. But you helped. I'm cautious, but not foolish, and I realize you mean well. I had intended to keep Amaranthine's secret as long as possible, since she did not turn out as expected, and seeing her might encourage my captors to push me even harder to produce better results. Before, I would not have minded, but now, she paused, looking at Amaranthine. Well, now I'm in no big hurry to die. When I die, so will she. My guess is that I have 2 years at the most, and I'd prefer if they just forgot about me until then. Do you think you could help me keep her secret? Blaine didn't hesitate. I will. Tell me what needs to be done. You may tell others you came here to visit with me by accident, much the way it happened. When asked, you can tell them she is a girl you met on the way here who suffered a head injury and was found wandering. With my being ill, I have asked if she can help me with simple tasks around my home until she recovers. Blaine nodded. This isn't far from the truth. Should be easy to convince others. Celeste smiled. And you, Amaranthine, do you think you can follow that story? You have no memory of who you were before. It's as though you were just born yesterday. Easy, right? Born yesterday. This is true, not lie, she said, confused. Celeste squeezed her hand. Only a small lie, my dear, to keep you safe. Safe. I will protect you. Blaine will teach me. He is my friend. That isn't such a bad idea, you know. However, I want you to keep in mind that when you are hurt, my life force sustains you. Don't be concerned, as my golem you take very little of it. Only a nibble here and there. I expect what it costs me will be well worth it in the end. Yours forever, Amaranthine said, quietly, gently squeezing her hand. Celeste stared at her for a moment, wiping away the tear that formed in her eye. I have a theory about why you turned out the way you did. I believe I mistakenly created you from an object with part of a soul bound to it somehow. A special object belonging to a young woman I once knew who died, a long time ago. Her name was Violet. Does the name Violet sound familiar to you? Amaranthine shook her head, upset. No, not Violet. I am Amaranthine. I am me. Celeste placed a hand on her face, moving her hair aside. I won't doubt you, my dear. If you say it, I believe you. I've never succeeded as a necromancer. In fact, I once knew many, and even the worst skilled among them was much better than I. Everything I made fell apart or went berserk or something similar. But you're perfect, so perfect in every way. So beautiful with such powerful emotions and a kind heart. My dear, golems aren't supposed to have such things. They're supposed to be unthinking constructs who follow orders, and that's in the best of circumstances. You are special. I don't understand why. Not completely, but I know I do not deserve someone so special to accompany me in my last days. But compared to you, I have lived a long life. I am so sorry that I brought you here only for you to live out such a brief one. Had I known you would be so intelligent and with feelings, I would have never have done so. Amaranthine gasped. No, don't say that. Don't say you wouldn't make me. Please don't ever say it again. Sad if you say it again. Yours forever. That makes me happy. Please don't say it. Celeste pulled her in close, wrapping her arms around her. I won't ever say it again, then. Blaine sighed, pulling a chair from the other side of the room, and sat down. My lady, before we leave you to rest, would you consider indulging me a question? Certainly, you may ask, Celeste said, slowly releasing Amaranthine and allowing her to sit up again. This, I suspect, is a very personal question. If you choose not to answer, I will understand, and I will beg forgiveness for my offense. But why is it that you are the only one left? You mentioned you knew several necromancers, and they were all more skilled than you. Did Moira hunt you as Arthurus did the witches who once ruled there? I was told there was a rebellion. Celeste relaxed into her bed, looking up blankly at the ceiling. Blaine waited patiently, but after a moment decided he had made a mistake. Please forgive my rudeness, my lady. No, Celeste sighed, breathing in deeply before letting out an enormous sigh. Next time I tell someone, Amaranthine should know this too. Before either of you decide you are fond of me, you should know who I really am, what I've done. Blaine and Amaranthine gave her their full attention. That's the end of chapter 4. We're going to do chapter 5. I don't think I need a drink this time. When I was a girl, it was hard to tell who was a necromancer and who wasn't. A far cry from the dangerous clan during the church's crusade against magic, hundreds of years ago. We were more forest people than anything else, though we were dedicated to the scholarly pursuits. In this way, I wasn't a complete disappointment. When our elders would return from their studies in Moira's grand library, I listened to every word of their stories. Even as a child, I was fascinated with history and learning. That's why, better than most, I should have understood the importance of our new way of life. Necromancers were not always so peaceful and studious, living to old ages. We were the reason the church began distrusting magic and sought the witches of Arthurus. In those early days, necromancers belonged to no kingdom, and were feared and distrusted everywhere they went. One necromancer, willing to die very young, could raise an army scavenging a bloody battlefield of dead but well-equipped soldiers, and become a force to be reckoned with. Imagine what many could do. Kings became greedy with power at their fingertips, offering great pools of wealth to a necromancer willing to tag along for their campaigns. 10,000 men became 20,000 or more with the necromancer in tow. Blaine sighed, sounding disappointed. It seemed the gruesome tales of necromancers as the butchers of the continent were not exaggerated after all. If anything, they fell short. That is terrifying. It's no wonder such power caught notice of the church all the way across the sea to the west. Yes, but only the ones greedier than the kings who coveted land and power were the necromancers. Necromancers found they could control the kings if they were willing to invest enough of their life force. Dying so young, it was difficult to bear many children. Male necromancers were known for the abuse of their women. Women could not practice until they were past childbearing age. They were often expected to change partners frequently, as one young man after another died. This took its toll on everyone, not just those I've mentioned. The necromancers hatched a plan to install themselves as kings. Blaine grunted, familiar with this part of the story. They even planned to install a kingdom in Arthurus, didn't they? Celeste nodded slowly, taking a deep breath before continuing. Yes, and that's the first place their ambition caught up to them. The witches in Arthurus were all women, and lived quiet, isolated lives. They were wise, seeing the writing on the walls of the times. Rumors of the necromancers traveled beyond the continent, and throughout the world. The pressure to act was growing. Fearing an alliance between the necromancers and the witches, considered being cut from the same cloth, The church acted, attacking those who thought were the weaker of the two. The largest land force ever assembled attacked them in the dead of night, and even the surprise and chaos, the witches decimated their forces with few casualties. Seizing their own opportunity, many necromancers came with their own undead armies, and yet more necromancers rained many dead from the battle that had just taken place. Again, the witches were beset by an even larger, even stronger force. Again they prevailed, and even though they couldn't kill the soldiers by traditional means, they burned the undead to the point they were no longer of use animated. The church, being unaware of the second battle entirely, returned to find the desecrated corpses of their brothers, and where else but in Arthurus. The witches were blamed, and soon the forces sent to attack them was such that even they couldn't prevail. The end of the witches was yet another stain on the reputation of the necromancers. Many other factions now fought against them, and the kingdoms previously making use of their abilities to grow their own armies turned on them as well. This led to the much different necromancer I grew up with. I'm surprised they weren't slaughtered completely, Blaine said. That came later, Celeste said. Amaranthine rubbed away a tear from her eye. Not your fault. Celeste turned away, pained by the memories she could no longer run from. She turned back and looked at them both, blinking away tears. My fault, in a way, Amaranthine, she said. They gripped one another's hands tightly. They escaped slaughter then, seeing what had happened to the witches, who they were no match against, finally brought them to reality. They would have to win over their enemies with diplomacy or perish. Desperate, they recreated their image as caretakers of the soul and dedicated scholars. Rather than raise the dead, they only created golems which they could make from any living thing. Most didn't even do that. Their enormous wealth was given to the church, and golems were often used to help build churches as proof that they had repented. Had they? Blaine asked skeptically. Believe it or not, they had. There was some early scheming on how they might return to power, but none ever saw the light of day. In time, everyone accepted their new station in life, and were simply happy to be alive. Few were left by that point. Most served the church directly and followed the path of holy men in the highest service of the church, siring no children. Yet they lived much longer. Even centuries later, there were a few of us. Now, there is only me. You don't have to talk about this if you aren't ready. It's clear how difficult this is for you. My time is running out. If I don't tell someone soon, then the secret might die with me. I can't bear that burden, so please continue to listen. In that case, I'm listening, Blaine said. Listening, Amaranthine said, nodding. Several years ago, a General Moira visited us on behalf of the king. His army didn't give us any time to react. They had already captured those who didn't live in our community and prevented anyone from sending a word of warning. We were all captured and separated. That if we didn't help, they would kill the rest. Little did those of us captured know that there was resistance afterwards, or so I was told. Those of us who remained were overwhelmed. When all was said and done, only I was left alive. I suspect I was the only one who gave in and agreed to help. If I hadn't done that, then maybe... Amaranthine? Amaranthine was now trembling and crying. Amara, are you all right? Blaine said, reaching out a hand to touch her shoulder. She jerked away and let go of Celeste. Sad. I don't know. I'm okay. Sorry. Celeste frowned now, believing even more that her theory was true. She opened her mouth to speak, but Amaranthine shouted over her. Not violent. I'm not. I'm me, she said, rushing back over and grabbing Celeste's hand again. If you didn't want to be near me right now, I would understand, Celeste said, turning away. Amaranthine grabbed her and pulled her close, turning her head and kissing her. Blaine stood up quickly, clearing his throat before walking out. Wow, am I ever hungry. Thank you for the story, Celeste. I'll be back in a few days with a gift for my new student. He didn't give them a chance to answer before finding his way out. Both women smiled at each other. No yelling no this time? Amaranthine asked. Celeste shook her head. Now I know it's just what you really want. I can confess that I rather like it. I just wanted you to know. I'm never going to command you like a golem usually would be. Since you have a will of your own, you're free to make your own choices. It would be strange otherwise, given how you feel about me. I will try really hard to learn. I will protect you and be yours forever. You don't have to command. I want to. Celeste looked into her eyes. Was this wrong? She'd created Amaranthine just yesterday, and to just be a simple servant. Already so much about this was taboo, but to feel this way about her. Surely it was wrong. This was just another thing to add to her list of wrongs. She didn't deserve to be happy, to have this. She should resist it. She should order Amaranthine not to feel this way about her, but... I've been so lonely this past few years. Is it wrong of me to want someone too? No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be asking you this. Amaranthine? Yes? She asked. You don't really hate me for what I did to the others? I haven't even told you all of it. It's okay. Tell me the rest. Afterwards, I made... Celeste tried. She thought it would be easier than this, but she was so tired and burdened by guilt. She took a deep breath. I resurrected soldiers, thousands of them. It was supposed to be more, but I'm not a very good necromancer. So my life force faded away so quickly. I'm not sure I want to do it anymore, Amaranthine. I want to die with dignity. What I want to do is refuse. If you say no to them, I will protect you to the end, she said. I'm glad you don't hate me. Yours forever, Amaranthine replied. I will go now, so you sleep. She stood up and took a step away from the bed when Celeste grabbed her dress. Would you, she was so embarrassed to ask, stay here with me? I know you don't need to sleep, but just lie here with me and let me hold you. Amaranthine smiled, crawling into bed and lying down facing her. Two held hands, and Celeste fell asleep looking into her eyes and feeling her warmth. This was the safest and happiest she felt in such a long time. Alright, that was the end of chapter 5. We're on chapter 6. I'm going to take a quick sip. The next morning, Celeste yawned and stretched in bed as she tried to stretch away the stiffness. Seeing the sun, she wondered if she'd only slept a few hours. Yet, it had been years since she felt so rejuvenated and alive. She rolled in her sleep, so she turned back over, hoping to see Amaranthine's face, but she was gone. A wave of panic washed over her as she relaxed into the sheets. Maybe she'd thought things through and decided she hated her after all. Maybe she'd gone back to the forest around the city to find Blaine. It was a dream, believing she'd stay with her after she'd given permission to go. Who would want to stay with her, a sickly traitor who wasn't long for this world anyway and deserved to pay for her sins? She certainly didn't deserve a beautiful woman to hold her hand to fall asleep next to her if she had. Just then, Amaranthine peeked around the corner. Awake! Oh, you're still here. I thought you'd gone, Celeste said, wiping her eyes. Sad? Amaranthine asked, tilting her head. No, she lied. I'm just rubbing my eyes because I only now woke up. How long have I been asleep? She asked. Whole day yesterday. Whole night. I did reading to learn better words. More words. Was reading a book just now, as a matter of fact. Celeste smiled, but hid it with her sleeve. As a matter of fact, huh? What sort of book are you reading right now? Recipe book, she shouted, disappearing around the corner. Celeste smiled and sat up in bed. She just considered making breakfast herself, since she had the energy, but this would be even better. What kind of... Oh, you're gone, she said, giggling. A moment later, she returned with a tray full of muffins. Here, muffins with berries. Celeste accepted the tray. It was the entire tray of muffins, not removed from the sheet. She tried again to hide her smile. Funny? Amaranthine asked. Adorable, Celeste corrected. Eat them with me? But you said I don't need to eat when we're together? Amaranthine asked, tilting her head. You don't need to, but that doesn't mean you can't. I want to enjoy them together with you, Celeste said, taking one muffin up and holding it to her mouth. Bite? Amaranthine asked, touching the muffin in front of her lips. Celeste nodded. Okay, she shouted, biting down on the muffin. Yum! Celeste bit down on the other end, even though the muffin was the last thing on her mind. You must have followed the directions carefully. These are wonderful. Thank you, my dear. You are making me so happy. You make me happy, too. Excuse me. Thank you for making me. I want to be yours forever. Is that okay? Celeste nodded, choking up again. My, you have really improved your words, haven't you? I really enjoy talking to you this way. Amaranthine reached out, putting her hand behind Celeste's head, pulling her into a kiss. I'm glad we talk easier now. I will keep learning so I have as many words as you soon. Celeste pulled back, stuffing the rest of the muffin in Amaranthine's mouth, holding both hands on her own cheeks to enjoy the warmth it brought to them. I feel wonderful for a change. Shall we garden together today? Yes, garden together sounds wonderful. This time maybe I can teach you, Amaranthine said, placing the tray of muffins on the table next to them and helping Celeste to her feet. I'd like that. Oh, and to answer your question, Celeste leaned forward, kissing her this time. I think I want to be yours forever, too. Amaranthine smiled brightly, gripping Celeste's hand as the two walked away to the garden together. Once they arrived, Amaranthine sorted through the Lysanthius seeds and showed Celeste how deep to dig them and space them apart. I'm sorry to bring this up, but do you wonder how it is you know how to garden this way? Amaranthine stopped for a moment, looking up at her. I guess you asked because Violet liked flowers. Could be from Violet. If you were right about her soul and I turned into Violet soon, would that make you the happiest? Celeste grabbed her hand, squeezing it tightly. No, I just want to understand better. That's all. I'm a terrible necromancer and you're so perfect. I just want to understand how you came to be you. Amaranthine nodded. Do you mind if I have a theory? Can I say it? Of course. I'd love to hear your theory. I think you made me what you really wanted, in your heart. You wanted someone to love you, so I am me. I love you. Celeste clutched her hands to her chest, nearly overwhelmed by the sudden rush of emotions. I like your theory, and you're right. I shouldn't overthink it. Necromancy is complicated, and I obviously can't explain all of this. All of you. Trying to understand why you are the way you are is just a waste of time, when I can just enjoy the way you are instead. I finally created something so wonderful. But bringing you into this world, it feels so wrong that I have these feelings about you. Amaranthine smiled. You're right. You shouldn't overthink it. Making me doesn't matter. I'm just here. I'm just me. It doesn't need to have anything to do with you. Imagine we just met. No one making anyone. Just two strangers meeting. Yes, you're right, but it's still a little strange, even seeing it like that. I always think too much about everything. Just then, a knock came at the door. Blaine, maybe is back already? Amaranthine asked, smiling. Probably. I don't get many visitors here. You can keep working. I'll answer the door, Celeste said, rising and wiping the sweat from her face and the dirt from her hands with a wet cloth from the basin nearby. Answering the door, the smile disappeared from her face. The man in front of her wasn't Blaine, but a Moiran officer in full uniform. She'd met him before. Sometimes General Hardin would send this man when he was away campaigning. He would deliver orders as a proxy. Celeste, you appear to be in better health today than last we met. I've come to inform you of a shipment of materials that will enter the city in a few weeks. We will need your skills and expertise to repurpose and send these materials back to the battlefield, he said, removing his hat and bowing slightly. This man was strange, but every bit as frightening as the general, considering one of the deadliest swordsmen in Moira, a combat instructor. He always used different words to describe corpses, calling them materials, and animating them was repurposing those materials. He spoke as though he were a necromancer himself. Colonel Nam, I wasn't expecting you to visit today, Celeste said, wringing her hands nervously. Oh, I'm not sure how that's relevant. The only purpose of my visit is to let you know approximately 800 units to arrive in a few weeks from our campaigns in the north. You will know what to do when they arrive, and you will deal with the general directly per usual once he returns. Good day, he said, returning to leave. Colonel, Celeste called after him, clutching her left elbow with her right hand. I have places to be. I have given you your instructions, he said, turning to face her again. Is there something you're misunderstanding? Normally it's so simple to communicate these things to you. Out with it then. What is it you need clarified? It's just, Celeste said, looking away. What is it? Are you sicker than you look or something? You look overwhelmed with fright now, after looking so vibrant when you answered the door. Were you thinking of saying something you might regret to Miss Celeste? I believe you would find it most unwise to talk back to me, given our agreement. She swallowed and tried to stand tall, but her wobbling legs gave away her true feelings. About these dead men, she said, trailing off. What did you say? He asked, taking a step inside the door. Celeste cowered, knowing he was about to strike her. Her whole body trembled now. Then she felt a hand slip into hers and another around her waist. She looked up to find Amaranthine coldly staring at the colonel. Celeste finally found the courage to speak. I won't animate the dead for your campaigns in the north anymore, or anywhere else. Our arrangement is over. He took a step forward. Who's this? You weren't authorized to bring anyone else into this house. I'm too weak and failed making my new golem. She is recovering from a head injury and needed a place to stay. So Trevor left her here with me for a while. Since you will not respect your agreement, I see no reason to continue treating as anything other than a prisoner. Girl, you are coming with me, he said, reaching out for Amaranthine, who shrank back and growled. I see. It's an animal like you. It's not recovering. You just need to teach it some manners. Colonel Nelm picked up a broom leaning against the wall by the door and drew it back to strike her when a hand appeared behind him, grabbing his arm. Isn't considered good manners to hit helpless women in Moira, Blaine asked. And who are you? The colonel asked, jerking his arm away. The traveler, she mentioned. Yeah, I've been here for a while. Sorry for eavesdropping. I thought it'd be nice and wait for you to leave so I wouldn't disturb the conversation. How dare you speak to me so casually? Bleh. How dare you speak to me so casually, and with that sword on your waist? Foreigners aren't allowed to carry them here. Perhaps a lesson is in order for you too? Blaine shrugged. Are you challenging me to a duel? If that's how you'd like to see it, call you what you want. And Moira recognizes duels as legal disputes, regardless of difference in citizenship, rank, or outcome, Blaine said. Of course, that's the law of every kingdom in the land. Our 3 witnesses? Blaine asked. These 2, and we will witness to each other. By now, the talking has lasted longer than the duel will. Draw your sword. Blaine stepped out into the clearing just in front of the house and drew his sword. I just got this a few weeks ago, and this is my first duel with it, so bear with me as I adjust to the weight. Whatever you say, since you're such a stickler for the rules, let's get our introductions out of the way. I'm Colonel Rick Dornelm, Senior Swordsmanship Instructor of the Moiran Army. The Colonel savored his introduction, especially the last part, wearing a giant grin on his face after he said it, drawing his own sword. Blaine Grave, traveler belonging to no city or country. The grin disappeared from the Colonel's face quicker than it came. You jest! The man will surely not appreciate you taking his name. Blaine's face hardened as he gripped the sword and relaxed into a stance. A foreign one, for sure. Come at me when you're ready. That's the end of chapter 6. I'm going to go and run to the little dragon's restroom real quick. You guys will get to hear my little commercial. I'll be right back.
Are you, or a dragon you know, suffering from an understocked gold hoard? On April 5th, 1933, President Roosevelt ordered all gold over a small value be turned in exchange for smelly, dirty, paper human money. On June 5th, 1933, the United States officially went off the gold standard. Do you know what happens when a dragon's breath touches paper money? Dragons have had to resort to desperate measures, assuming human-like forms, depositing this paper money into human banks, and working jobs. Gone are the days you could burn down a castle and take its treasure. Many dragons are working on rebuilding their stocks of gold. But the exchange rate from feeble green paper to beautiful golden metal is very challenging. Please consider supporting Dragon streamers with a donation, Twitch subscription, or art commission. Your donations will go toward gold bars and coins, which will eventually allow your dragon to sleep on a bed of gold again. It's the only way for a dragon to get a proper rest. Please call the 1-800 number below on your screen to make a donation today. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and compassion. Are you, or a dragon you know, suffering from an understocked gold hoard? On April 5th, 1933, President Roosevelt ordered all gold over a small value be turned in exchange for smelly, dirty, paper human money. On June 5th, 1933, the United States officially went off the gold standard. Do you know what happens when a dragon's breath touches paper money? Dragons have had to resort to desperate measures, assuming human-like forms, depositing this paper money into human banks, and working jobs. Gone are the days you could burn down a castle and take its treasure. Many dragons are working on rebuilding their stocks of gold, but the exchange rate from feeble green paper to beautiful golden metal is very challenging. Please consider supporting dragon streamers with a donation, Twitch subscription, or art commission. Your donations will go toward gold bars and coins, which will eventually allow your dragon to sleep on a bed of gold again. It's the only way for a dragon to get a proper rest. Please call the 1-800 number below on your screen to make a donation today. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and compassion. Are you, or a dragon you know, suffering from an understocked gold hoard? On April 5th, 1933, President Roosevelt ordered all gold over a small value be turned in and exchanged for smelly, dirty, paper human money. On June 5th, 1933, the United States officially went off the gold standard. Do you know what happens when a dragon's breath touches paper money? Dragons have had to resort to desperate measures, assuming human-like forms, depositing this paper money into human banks, and working jobs. Gone are the days you could burn down a castle and take its treasure. Many dragons are working on rebuilding their stocks of gold, but the exchange rate from feeble green paper to beautiful golden metal is very challenging. Please consider supporting dragon streamers with a donation, Twitch subscription, or art commission. Your donations will go toward gold bars and coins, which will eventually allow your dragon to sleep on a bed of gold again. It's the only way for a dragon to get a proper rest. Please call the 1-800 number below on your screen to make a donation today. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and compassion. Are you, or a dragon you know, suffering from an understocked gold hoard? On April 5th, 1933, President Roosevelt ordered all gold over a small value be turned in and exchanged for smelly, dirty, paper human money. On June 5th, 1933, the United States officially went off the gold standard. Do you know what happens when a dragon's breath touches paper money? Dragons have had to resort to desperate measures, assuming human-like forms, depositing this paper money into human banks, and working jobs. Gone are the days you could burn down a castle and take its treasure. Many dragons are working on rebuilding their stocks of gold, but the exchange rate from feeble green paper to beautiful golden metal is very challenging. Please consider supporting dragon streamers with a donation, Twitch subscription, or art commission. Your donations will go toward gold bars and coins, which will eventually allow your dragon to sleep on a bed of gold again. It's the only...
Alright, I'm back. So we're halfway through the book. We're on chapter 7 now. We have our first little conflict of the book going on. These are cute little Yuri light novels. I should have put in there that it was a Yuri book. Since I'm still halfway through, I suppose that we could do that. Put dramatic reading on here too. This is not exactly ASMR, but there's no narration category, so there we go. All right. Colonel Richter Nelm drew his sword and extended it out in front of him. Unlike Blaine's sword, Nelm's was long and thin, making it much lighter. You should know that you'll never be able to keep up with me swinging that bulky hand and a half around. It's not too late to yield, Richter said, grinning. Blaine didn't answer. He continued holding the sword in front of him, both hands on the hilt. No hint of a smile on his face. Suit yourself, the colonel shouted, propelling himself off the first step, nearly leaping as he moved forward with incredible speed. At first, the thrust appeared it would find a home at the center of Blaine's chest. Blaine was making no effort to move. At the last possible moment, Blaine twisted in his upper body and leaned forward, allowing the blade to slide across his torso. On the initial thrust, the edge was away from his body. Colonel Nelm quickly adjusted the blade, twisting his wrist so the sharp side would be against Blaine's body as he attempted to quickly withdraw it. Before he could, however, Blaine turned and thrust his blade toward the sky, catching the lighter blade on the thick cross guard of his sword, knocking it completely out of alignment with his body and disrupting the colonel's footing. With a cat's reflexes no one would have expected from such a large, muscular man, Blaine twisted his torso in the opposite direction, turning his foot and leaning down into a downward slash, gently resting his blade against Richter's neck before he had any chance to evade or block. Best of three? Blaine asked. Your luck won't last 3 rounds. You should have walked away with Fortune's gift when you had the chance, Colonel said, chuckling as he took several steps back. Also, I should warn you, and you should already be aware, that the rules don't dictate that I spare your life. If you choose to foolishly halt your own strike like that, don't call me dishonorable for failing to do the same. He smiled, looking over to Celeste. If I kill him, you are to raise him. Even though he's a fool, he'd still make quite the warrior for our campaign. Amaranthine took a step forward, shaking her head. No, I'll... Blaine cast a sharp scowl in her direction, slowly shaking his head, signaling for her to say nothing else. All right, Celeste said. If this is the wager you like to make, I'll agree to it. But if Blaine wins, you are to leave here, and I will speak to the general himself when he returns. Richter raised his eyebrows. Oh, it seems all of you are intent to gang up on poor me. Hardly seems fair, does it? Look, as I just said to your friend here, I'm not a man who plays these childish games. It was not a wager. It was an order. Celeste recoiled, losing her nerve. Amaranthine squeezed her hand tightly again, hugging her arm. Celeste recoiled. Oh, yeah, Blaine sighed. I was going to repeat the same line. If you're that set on having no fun at all, I'll just end it quickly. Colonel Nelm clenched his teeth. Men like you make me sick to my stomach. So full of hubris the moment you have a single stroke of luck. If you knew anything about swordsmanship, you would know lightning almost never strikes the same place twice. Instead, you've chosen death. You will make a great thrall of the northern campaign, at least. You sure talk a lot for a humble man, Blaine said, holding his blade in a different stance from before. Richter held up his sword again, but this time it was Blaine who moved first. Even faster than a smaller, thinner opponent. Much faster. Richter responded quickly with a thrust toward Blaine's neck. In one swift motion, Blaine let go of his sword with his left hand and caught the blade between 2 fingers and his thumb. Shocked, Richter hesitated before attempting to yank his blade back. Blaine's hand barely moved, and he held the captured blade firm. Flipping his own sword in his right hand, he brought the pommel swiftly upward, striking his opponent in the elbow of his fully extended arm. With a crack, his arm bent unnaturally, and he sucked in a pained gasp. He dropped to his knees, clutching his elbow and releasing his sword to fall on the ground. I suppose lightning strikes the same place twice occasionally. I believe that's the second round for me. Of course, unless you'd want to go to a best of 5, Blaine said, standing over Richter with his sword resting on his shoulder. Richter sucked in air through his gritted teeth. So you're really him after all. Tread lightly here, Blind Grave. A man once so important to the city of Arthur could be seen as a threat to our kingdom's security. I'll keep that in mind. Can't say I'm enjoying my stay very much, and since I've bested the most skilled swordsman in the kingdom already, now that's crossed off the list too. I don't imagine I'll be around for much longer. Perhaps I'll travel north next and see what I can find there. Oh, believe it or not, swordsmanship is far from my greatest skill. Regardless, the general will hear about this. For your sake, I suggest you learn not to meddle in other nations' affairs. He rose to his feet and gathered his sword, walking down the path away from Celeste's home slowly. Once he had time to make it plenty of distance away and well out of sight, Blaine turned to face the two women. Hooray! Friend Blaine did it! Teach, teach, teach! Amaranthine cheered and chanted the last three words, bouncing on her heels. You're celebrating, really? Celeste scolded, letting go of Amaranthine's hand and putting both hands on her hips, spinning around and looking at Blaine before pointing a finger at him. Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you've caused us, Mr. Hero? Now that you've injured him and gotten him practically boiling with anger, he's going to be looking for his revenge. More mad at Mr. Hero, less mad at us now, Amaranthine said, nodding sagely. Blaine grinned. Well, that's part of it. I think he has it out for me personally now, but he hasn't forgotten about your refusal. The main reason I did it you don't seem to be aware of. Come, Amara, see the present I brought you. Blaine walked around to the side of the house, motioning for her to follow. She beamed, skipping and humming as she followed him. Celeste, despite her indignation, had no choice but to follow. For all the energy her happiness was giving her earlier, her frustration was giving her just as much now. She was rethinking her admiration for Blaine. Blaine pointed to a cart with a massive halberd tied to it. He picked it up by the handle, demonstrating the way he brought it up their path. What on earth is that unwieldy thing, and why would Amaranthine want it? Celeste asked, crossing her arms. Whack! Amaranthine said, motioning a mock downward strike. Blaine smiled and nodded. Whack. Big whack. Celeste huffed. Blaine Grave, I'm 10 seconds from sending you away. Believe me, I'm trying very hard not to find a reason I shouldn't. You are not making this easy. Patience, my dear, patience. Walk with us for a bit, he said, still wearing a smile, almost as big as Amaranthine. Celeste felt as though there had been some kind of inside joke she knew nothing about. Maybe this is what Blaine meant by her still not being aware of his reasons for engaging the colonel. Still, in the excitement, her fatigue was catching up to her. She looked up and shielded her eyes from the sun, likely only warm to them, but practically baking for her. I'm sorry, I'm not sure I can, she said, slumping her shoulders. I can carry you if you like, Blaine said. Amaranthine shoved him. No, me! I will carry her, Blaine. Blaine chuckled. All right, far be it from me to get between you. Easy, my friend. You know I meant nothing by it. I'll just leave the weapon tied to the cart for now. Amaranthine bent down, motioning for Celeste to climb onto her back. At first she hesitated, but Amaranthine's warm smile convinced her. Okay, my dear, since you asked me so sweetly, Celeste said, a smile returning to her face. After walking around for a few minutes, they neared a patch of trees off to the side of the path. All right, Blaine said, untying the weapon. Just like when we met. That big tree over there. Amaranthine let Celeste down gently and picked up the weapon. Celeste's jaw nearly hit the ground. Besides being intelligent and indistinguishable from human, she couldn't possibly be this strong. A failure like her could never have made a golem so impressive in so many ways. In fact, until just now, Celeste had almost forgotten that Amaranthine was a golem. She'd seen her so much differently, as a woman, just like her. Amaranthine walked over to the tree and held the giant weapon over her shoulder. With a step forward, she slammed it into the side of the tree. It ripped through, making a terrible roar as the wood splintered rapidly. Despite it looking sharp, blunt force was more the cause of it passing through the tree than anything else. Celeste clutched at her dress with both hands, gripping the fabric tightly. That's impossible, isn't it? She asked, looking to Blaine. Blaine shrugged. You're asking me? Are all creations of a necromancer not like this? I thought she might be a little stronger than you thought, but you seemed completely shocked. How strong were you expecting her to be? Celeste shook her head. As strong as me, I suppose. She's so perfect, and I can't see her as anything other than human anymore. It's just hard to remember that she isn't. Celeste hung on the last word, frowning. I've never seen her as anything other than human either, and I still don't. Neither should you. She's just strong because that's something you gave her. Don't see her any differently because of it. Celeste nodded slowly, watching Amaranthine turn to smile and wave at them. Okay, Blaine, I've forgiven you. You're right, of course. She's become special to me. Did you see that, Blaine? Celeste, did you see what I did with my present? Amaranthine yelled excitedly, waving at them as she held the giant weapon with one hand, resting it on her shoulder. I saw. You're so very strong, my dear, Celeste shouted in return. I'm going to protect you with this, she said, pointing to the weapon, forever. Do you understand why I stepped in when I did? Blaine said with his voice lowered. Celeste nodded. I understand completely now. She would have smashed him like a bug, and we'd have had to deal with everything that followed. Blaine nodded. Oh, and another thing. Did you hear who he said he'd been informing? The general, actually. Curious. Very curious. Why not the king? He's here, even close by. Yes, why not the king? Celeste repeated, tapping her cheek. You two should carry on like normal for a bit. I think I'll go see the king. I should be able to manage it. Do you think it'll help? She asked. He's the reason I'm in this predicament. Maybe. I just need to check on something, Blaine said, adjusting his sword belt before turning to walk back down the path. Best of luck to you, Blaine. Thank you for everything you've done for the two of us. Amaranthine approached Celeste and dropped her weapon in the high grass beside the path. I'll leave this here for now so I can carry you. Flowers and herbs in the forest I want to pick together. Will you pick them with me? Amaranthine asked, taking Celeste's hands. I would love that so much, Celeste said, giving her hands a gentle squeeze. And that's the end of chapter 7. Moving right along here. Chapter 8. The two of them walked off the path and through the forest. Amaranthine seemed to know it so well. Every plant she pointed at and identified, even having never been in this forest before. She could tell the difference between the mushrooms, which were edible and which were poisonous, which wild plant would give you energy and which would make you feel ill. She handed a mint to Celeste to chew on, and it made her feel lighter, besides being under the shade of so many trees. Still, her strength was already fading, and so early in the day. Only from the excitement of the morning and in the time they'd spent walking together was enough to drain her. Thank you for showing me all this, but I'm afraid we'll have to go soon. I'd like to spend a few more minutes here, though, if that's all right. Can we sit together? Celeste asked, sitting on a log and patting the spot beside her. Amaranthine smiled and sat next to her, resting her head on her shoulder. Celeste wrapped her arm around her and held her tight. Thank you for being with me, Celeste said, leaning her head to rest against Amaranthine's. I'm yours forever, remember? Celeste sighed. I do remember, my dear. I only wish that forever could be further away. When I was younger, I ran through these forests without a care in the world. It's where I usually spent time with, she trailed off. Violet? Amaranthine asked. Celeste gently nodded. Yes. Will you tell me about her? Amaranthine asked, surprising her. Are you sure you want to hear? I'm ready to hear more about her. If you think we may be linked, it may help me understand why I know things you didn't teach me. Celeste hugged her tightly. Just remember that it's you who's here with me now, and I wouldn't want to any other way. Do you understand that? I do. It's all right. You can tell me. I won't get upset this time. I promise. Celeste brought her other arm up to wrap around Amaranthine's shoulder. Several years ago, I had a very special friend. Neither of us were very good necromancers. We were far more interested in plants and nature. Since necromancers no longer used their powers, that wasn't such a bad thing. We were tolerated officially, so as long as we kept that agreement. There was no need for hiding or keeping secrets. Some of us had normal jobs inside the city. I heard that some had joined the service of the king, too. Moira wasn't anything like Arthurus, where the riches were hunted and killed. We made peace and lived in peace. Sounds nice, Amaranthine said, sighing. It was, she said, pausing for a moment to gather her thoughts. Violet and I planted our own secret garden where we could meet and share our hobby together. To facilitate the treaty, the king supported the necromancer community with a small amount of the kingdom's treasure in order to allow them to study and remain in a tight community. We became the kingdom's scholars. It's so funny because few of us were actually family. Necromancers had spent the previous decades separated and roaming throughout the continent. It was like a reunion when the whole community was established. Violet and I would meet in that garden almost every day, and we would talk for hours. The garden wasn't so much of a secret, really. Most people knew about it, and sometimes we'd get interrupted, but rarely. I would love to listen to her describe her ideas about gardening to me. She would often say that she considered it to be a form of necromancy. Plants would die, and we would harvest their seeds they left behind. We'd put a bit of ourselves into planting them, and with our time and our efforts, it would rise again from the dead. She said it was a lot nicer than using people. She didn't like the stories of the old necromancers. I think she would have been disappointed in me for what I've done. Celeste wiped a tear from her eye. Amaranthine looked up at her and slowly sat up straight, reaching out and wiping her eyes. You can cry. It's okay. Did you love Violet? Celeste couldn't hold back the tears any longer, burying her face into Amaranthine's shoulder. I never got the chance to say it. I thought we would have forever. I thought I would do it the next day, or the next month, or year. We were so young. I thought there would be plenty of time. I wanted to know if she felt the same, but now I'll never know. What happened to her? Amaranthine asked, stroking Celeste's hair. I wasn't there with her when she died, only knowing they killed her in our garden. I agreed to help them in order to save the others, but they killed them anyway. When they built my prison I call home, I begged for it to be next to the garden. They allowed me that. For years I took care of the garden. It was the only thing that kept me going. I spent hours every day working on it. I looked different back then, Amaranthine. You should have seen me. I could crawl around in the dirt without ever getting tired, and barely knew what makeup was. I certainly didn't need it to hide the dark rings around my eyes and my pale face. Still, with every new shipment of dead soldiers to reanimate, I grew weaker and weaker. I couldn't take care of the garden anymore. It was then that Violet truly died for me. Watching the garden die was like watching her die. That's why I made you from one of the last remaining flowers. I just couldn't let go. Amaranthine placed her hands on each side of Celeste's face, wiping her tears with her thumbs. May I kiss you? Celeste nodded, closing her eyes and leaning forward. Amaranthine pulled her close and touched their lips together. They stayed that way for a moment. This girl, who had earlier just chopped down an enormous tree with a giant weapon, was holding her so softly and gently, the way a child would cradle a moth to preserve its delicate wings. Her lips felt warm. She hated the idea that Amaranthine was her golem, for she could never see her that way ever again. Not as a golem, or Violet, or anything else. She was Amaranthine, a person, her hope and her gateway to feeling love and happiness again. Feelings that had become so buried, so lost, that she'd nearly forgotten that she'd ever felt them at all. Amaranthine moved away, but Celeste pulled her in close again, kissing her this time. After a moment, the two sat up straight, and Celeste took her hands in her own. She smiled. That was wonderful. Each day will feel like 1,000 years if I can spend it with you. Amaranthine performed tears of her own. I love you, Celeste. And I love you, she replied. A rustling in the bushes nearby startled them. Many soldiers emerged, weapons drawn. So sorry to interrupt your little picnic in the woods, ladies, but Colonel Nem would like a word, one man said. It seemed that he was the one in charge. At the castle? Celeste asked. I said he wanted a word, not me. I didn't come here to answer your questions, necromancer. This doesn't sound like a friendly chat, Celeste said, rising weakly to her feet. Amaranthine stood quickly to help steady her. You don't look like much of a threat. Don't suppose it'll hurt anyone to tell you while I'm here. Colonel might get angry, but that's the Colonel. He's always angry. Celeste crossed her arms impatiently. Truth is, no, this isn't a friendly invitation to a tea party. You're being placed under arrest and will be questioned by Colonel Nam personally about what's happened recently. Of course, the General appreciates your service, and the Colonel doesn't wish to upset him by allowing this to end badly. That's up to you, of course, but I believe the Colonel will be sympathetic if there's some way we can accommodate you. A way that allows you to continue your service to the Moiran army, of course. Leave her alone, Amaranthine said, growling. Dear, no. No matter what, I want you to stay calm and do not resist. I don't care what they do. Am I clear? Your friend said it was very important. You're recovering, remember? Celeste said, grabbing Amaranthine's arm and scolding her. But I can, she started. I said no, Celeste shouted, startling Amaranthine and causing her to take a step back. Wow, you're so harsh to your servant girl, poor thing. I'm sure she'll be relieved to get rid of you. If I agree to come with you, will you leave her at my home and allow me to return to her after our conversation? Celeste asked. That's entirely up to the Colonel, whether you return home, that is. As for the girl, I'm afraid the Colonel already saw through your little ruse. That girl is important to you for some reason or another, even if we do not know what the reason is. We will hold her as insurance. Please don't hurt her. The man sighed, looking to Amaranthine, then back to Celeste. All right, since I'm in charge of her detainment, I'll give you my word that it won't harm her. You understand the Colonel could give me no choice later, but for as long as I'm making the call, she will be safe and unharmed. Celeste exhaled, reaching out and taking Amaranthine's hand. Remember, no fighting, okay? It's very important to your friend and I that you don't. Promise me that you'll behave. Amarantine looked up at her frustration and sadness gnawing at her. She wore her heart on her sleeve. I promise. That's my girl, Celeste said, forcing a smile. She gripped her hand tightly for a moment before letting her go. I'll see you soon, she said, not knowing whether that was true. And that was the end of chapter 8. Moving on to chapter 9. Celeste was expecting it to be taken to different parts of the dungeon, but not a different location entirely. She knew that separating so far from her would put Amarantine under a great deal of strain and weaken her. Too far might even kill her. Not quickly, but eventually. Still, she could say nothing to those transporting her, or they might get suspicious. Blaine was right that nearly anything was worth them not finding out about her. Either they tried to force her to use Amarantine on the front lines of the war, or they'd end her outright, out of fear. She was too unusual for a golem. Impossible, even. Everyone fears what they don't understand and can't explain. Forcing her into something she didn't want to do, especially hurting people when she was such a kind heart, was far too cruel. Losing her was something Celeste didn't even want to consider. Didn't even want to think about. She was finally happy. No matter what Amarantine was to her, or how it might be interpreted by others, she decided. Whether she was some kind of resurrection, or piece of Violet's soul, or something else entirely, she was Amarantine to her. Nothing more, nothing less. After continuing a little deeper into the forest, the wagon finally came to a stop. Celeste recognized this place. It was once her home. To think such a place was hidden and not all that far from her own home. However, it made sense in a way. One enemy didn't repurpose conquered land for their own use. She should have expected they'd put something here. One guard jumped off the wagon and held out a hand to her. We've arrived. Please don't cause any trouble. I'll remind you we can have a message to the dungeon in a very short amount of time. That girl's life is in your hands. It would be wise of you not to forget that, he said. Celeste nodded, heeding his words. She offered her hand and carefully climbed down, following him deep into what was now a military camp. However, something about it felt unofficial. There were no trumpets playing to their arrival, no banners displayed, no markings to guide visitors. Was this camp secret? It was close to the capital, but plenty far enough away to avoid detection. And with the necromancers being gone from this area for years, and such an ugly conflict taking place here, no one would think to visit it. Everything about this place was taboo, even just visiting it. This way, he said, leading her into a stone building deep in the camp. The colonel is waiting for you. After placing her into a prison cell, he walked away. A few minutes later, Colonel Nelm walked into the room, carrying a chair. He placed it down in front of her and sat. Funny we should meet again so soon, he said. Nothing funny about it. I was thinking the opposite. Depressing, Celeste said, sitting down in the far corner of the cell, eyeing its emptiness. I'm not an animal, you know. You needn't fear a used-up necromancer like me. In fact, if you walk away, I may very well be dead by the time you come back. We both know that isn't true, Nem said, smiling. At the rate you've spent your life for us, I suspect you have a couple years left if you use no more of it. His accuracy stunned her, but she did her best not to show it. Days, probably. I suspect it'll last a few weeks. That's why I've refused to help further. Seems I won't live long enough for the new shipment of bodies to arrive anyway. Do you blame me for being selfish? He smiled, leaning back in his chair. Of course not, my dear. We're all selfish. In fact, it's a well-known necromancer trait, wouldn't you agree? However, I would appreciate if you didn't try to lie to me. Celeste narrowed her eyes. And what would you know about it anyway? Do you think you know the remaining life force of a necromancer better than the necromancer herself? You're quite arrogant, not to mention ignorant. Oh, I'd say I know at least as well as any other necromancer, being that I am one. Celeste approached the bars, clenching her teeth. You are a liar and a cruel man, Colonel Nelm. How dare you say such a thing to me? Nelm locked eyes with her and then slowly extended his hand in the wall's direction, pointing down to the floor. A dead rat lay there. It hadn't been dead long. He gestured to it and twitched, and then stood up, animated by a necromancer's magic. Do you really not remember me, Celeste? You're the necromancer who went to work in the capital as an advisor to the king. That's why I didn't recognize you at first. You rarely came to the village. Celeste was beside herself. If this was true, it meant that she wasn't the only one. Was he the one responsible? Does that mean you're the one who caused all this? She asked. No, Helm said, grabbing the bars, starting Celeste so much that she fell backwards onto the floor. Your kind started this. You'd rather play in gardens and read history books than be true to your own history. Necromancers were once proud. We once succeeded kings. We should have been kings, but there was no need. They begged for our help. We were like gods. In time, we could have ruled the entire island of Nethelos. Then the world. Instead, we were intimidated by saber rattlings from the church and tucked our tails between our legs like cowards. We hid away in these forests on gifted land and treasure from the Moiran king, a king we should have had under our thumb. Well, thanks to the general, I fixed that, Celeste. The king eats from our hand. The general has big plans for us. Join me, Celeste. Played in the gardens, you mean? Did I killed your precious friend? Oh, yes, and would you like to know what I told her before she died? Celeste bit her lip, fighting back the tears. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I love that look. You're quite pretty when you're in such deep despair. I told her that you sold her out. Her, specifically. I found her waiting for you there, you know. She thought she could escape together. She died thinking you secretly hated her and betrayed her. How could you? Celeste said, unable to hold back the tears now. Why? Because the two of you represented everything wrong with what necromancers have become. You only cared about your plants and your garden and your friendship or whatever it was. At least the others preserved our knowledge. The two of you spat on our history. Imagine my joy when it was you who agreed to help us in order to save the others. I thought at first that I might make you my woman to produce my heirs. Then I witnessed your ineptitude for myself. Of all the necromancers I've seen practice our art, you were the absolute worst. So I came up with a new plan. I would let you use up your entire life force winning our northern war before I began using my own, thus extending my own life as long as possible. You'll be pleased to hear I'm gifted commander, so taking control of your resurrections was a minor feat. I'm one of the few to ever live who can seize control of another necromancer's creations, you know. I'll never forgive you, Celeste said, squeaking out the words amidst the tears. Still on that, are you? Did you not hear anything else I just said? He asked, shaking his head. I'll never forgive you, Rector Nelm. Never, she repeated, clenching her teeth so hard it hurt. You'll pay for this. Hey, easy there. You better behave yourself and listen to the rest of what I had to say. Tell me, did you actually see anyone die during those weeks? You fancy yourself the last of the necromancers, don't you? If I told you that is very much not the case, and that you could save those who remain being held prisoner. Think about it. I'm proof that you aren't the last one. Anything is possible, but men like you, all you do is deceive. Every other word you speak is a lie. Your words mean nothing to me. Soon I'll escape here, and we'll see how good of a necromancer you are. I have nothing left to lose, weeks or years. I'll happily give them up to kill you. He laughed, nearly falling out of his chair. Oh, will you now? Every other word I speak is a lie, is it? Then let us demonstrate. I would hate to ask so much of you, yet expect you to believe me without proof. He clenched his hand, allowing the rat to die again. Go on, he said, smiling. It won't take much of your life force, just a taste. Bring the rat to life. You have my blessing to dump as much of your life force into it as you like. Maybe you'll have it jump and bite my neck before I had the chance to dodge it. Go ahead. Take revenge for your little violets. Celeste stood up, holding out both her hands, roaring as she fed her life into the rat. It leaped to his feet and launched itself into the air. With a subtle wave of the colonel's hand, it flew over his shoulder and landed harmlessly on the floor. Your powers truly are pathetic. If you'd been any other necromancer, I have not allowed your thrall to be so close. But being that it's you, I knew I had nothing to fear. At least you will fight, though, unlike your little friend. She just cried, saying you couldn't have really betrayed her. She was so sad. You should have seen her on her knees, crying into her hands like a child. She didn't even notice when I came up behind her and... Celeste screamed, stretching her arms to the bars and clutching toward him, inches from his face. Nelm laughed. Sorry, you were just too funny just now. You sidetracked me. Anyway, when I stabbed her in the back, she grabbed one of those purple flowers the two of you like so much and hugged it close to her. She even tried to fight me. She spent the last of her life force whispering in your name, asking why you did such a thing to her. Celeste collapsed to her knees, gripping the bars, before slowly sliding down to the floor, hugging her knees to her chest. Oh no, have I broken you? Well, I'll leave you to your grief. Maybe you should reconsider how much of a liar I am and consider helping your fellow necromancers who are alive. I'd be willing to release them if you continue performing the resurrections. After all, one of them might even be willing to take your place to protect the rest. Not likely. Turns out that only you were that selfish. Poor Violet. What a disappointment it must have been to have depended on someone like you, only to have them fall short of her low expectations. Nell picked up his chair and left the room. Celeste wanted to cry so badly to do something. Anything. But all she could do was cry. And that's the end of chapter 9. We're going to take a quick break. Quick sip of the water. Sonny, thought about coming up. I guess he decided against it. He's still, wandering around the room a bit. He's meowing and saying hello. Oh, there he is. You might have heard him jump on here. He did a little coo. So apologies if his little tail makes my model go crazy for a second. He does that when he gets up here and decides to settle in. He likes to be petted and stuff. I have to move my keyboard out of the way so he can get settled in quicker. He's purring so loud. Too bad that the microphone can't pick him up at all. Alright, chapter 10. Amaranthine sat quietly in her cell in the dungeon. The soldier had kept his word to Celeste and hadn't harmed her. Instead, they'd shown her no attention at all. They'd lock her up in complete darkness, and she got the feeling no one else was nearby. They told her they'd come get her when they were ready, and that not to bother shouting because no one would hear her anyway. She wanted so badly to bend apart the bars and walk out, then rush to rescue Celeste. But then she remembered how desperately she pleaded with her not to fight against them, so as to not expose herself as her golem. And so, she had decided she had to bear it. No, the choice wasn't there for long. All she was left with was an uneasy quiet as she slowly felt the strength leaving her body. They must have taken Celeste somewhere else. In the forest with Blaine, she remembered she was so hungry. Even just a little distance away, she ate everything he had. It was still draining rapidly. She was strong enough to chop a small tree, but she was many times stronger the next day when Blaine came to visit, and she was near Celeste. But it was more than that. Being away from her, it didn't just hurt her body. Her heart ached, too. She missed her and worried they might hurt her. If they killed her, Amaranthine would cease to exist. Maybe she'd just die or collapse into a pile of dust. No, Sonny, no. Sorry, he was about to, knock over my pop. Maybe she'd just die or collapse into a pile of dust. Either way, that hadn't happened yet, and that gave her some small amount of comfort. She would just have to hold on until then. She wondered if Celeste might worry for her the same way, but this only made her feel worse. As time drew on, she felt weaker and weaker. At first, she no longer felt strong, but soon she could no longer stand. Then she couldn't even sit up. All she could do was lie there on the cold, hard stone floor. Was she going to die here? Would Celeste cry when she found out? Would she just make a new golem to take her place? She wondered if anyone would miss her, so far away and alone. A few hours later, she could no longer hold her eyes open. It wasn't sleep that was coming. It felt more like death, or at least what she imagined death would feel like. The emptiness, the cold, the loneliness. She had hoped to avoid the loneliness. The worst part of all this is that she'd promised Celeste that she'd be hers forever, but now it seemed like she wouldn't be able to keep that promise after all. And they'd never get to meet again in their garden like they used to. Wait, our garden? Like we used to? She opened her eyes again and she was sitting in their garden. Something was different, though. And many things were different. The surrounding area grew thick with weeds and bushes and trees as far as she could see. Only a small path seemed to cut through but was laid over with low-hanging tree branches. After a moment, she realized she wasn't in control anymore. She was just an observer. These were somebody else's memories. Violet's? After a moment, she realized a sound came through the bushes, and she turned around smiling. Celeste! But it wasn't Celeste. It was that Richter Nelm guy, Blaine. Be up. But why was he here? He looked younger, too. Sorry, just me. Victor, she asked, not understanding at all why he'd come. How did you find this place? He smiled. We visited here just a few years ago. Don't you remember? You haven't forgotten us that quickly, have you? And so what if I did? I see. So there is another now, who you've given your heart to? There is. Don't think I've forgotten what you asked me the last time I saw you. Besides, don't you realize we're being rounded up? She paused, her eyes wide. Oh, Richter, please tell me you didn't. He took a step forward, grabbing her hand. You can save her, you know. You can save them all. All you need to do is be my woman. The children we have together will be strong. You're special, like me. I know that you have the power to bind your soul to living things. It's how a flower that only blooms once a year now blooms forever. They become undying. A small part of you suspends them in time. Your unique ability and mine, together we can create undying soldiers who don't fall apart after weeks or months. Perhaps our children will inherit these abilities. Think of it, Violet. Necromancers can return to their former glory. They don't have to be peasants beneath the thumb of weak bureaucrats anymore, with their noses buried in books. I met a man who can change it all. When we conquer the North, I will be king there, and he will become king there. As allies, we will spread necromancy throughout the land again. As allies, huh? Clearly he doesn't know you well as he thinks. Either that or he's a fool, Violet said, trying to pull away. But he held her hand even tighter. Of course, my dear, did you really think I wouldn't just take both? If I'm controlling the troops, there's no agreement I need to honor. I will unite the two kingdoms and rule them. Imagine it, you could be queen of it all. A vast and ever-growing empire. With the witches long gone, no one can ever surpass our power. One holy maiden can do nothing and been dealt with easily enough. This man has already been in contact with the bishop there. Likely he'll hand the city over for his own benefit. Such men are simple to deal with. Perhaps some of the other kingdoms will be ruled by such men too. Don't be so sure of that. Now let go of me, she said, trying and failing again to yank her hand away. Do you think your little Celeste is going to come and save you, Violet? That girl is a necromancer, name only. All she cares about is you. She doesn't know what a rule breaker you are, that you've been practicing your forbidden arts on these flowers. Besides, are you actually a couple? That's none of your business, she said, turning away. And you haven't confessed to her yet, have you? For someone so bold, you certainly are a coward in these matters. She doesn't feel the same way, but I do. Choose me, Violet. Listen, you won't just be producing children like many did in the old days. There are some of the new ways I will keep. Continue to practice your abilities for your own desires. You can help me make decisions and temper my poor qualities you hate so much. You can hold me back when I'm about to go too far. Only someone I love could do that, so please. Do you really think I'd ever agree to something like that? She shouted, yanking her hand hard this time, pulling herself free. Richter stood in silence for a moment, looking down at his feet. Then, if I allow you to be with this woman, if I allow her to live and for you to be together, only asking that we have children together, would you consider it a deal then? This time it was Violet who looked down at her feet, not sure what to say. Richter laughed. I can't believe you actually care that much more about her than me. You'd have children with me, someone you find so disgusting, for the chance to stay with that stupid half-wit, near-powerless girl. Well then, my dear, I have bad news. Violet looked up, taking a step back. Please don't hurt her. Richter smiled, rubbing his chin. Now there's a promise I can keep. Hurting her has become impossible. She's dead. Violet's hand covered her mouth, and her eyes welled with tears. No, you're lying. You're right, I am lying. See how much pain you felt when I told her she was dead? Do you really want to experience it genuinely when I kill her before your very eyes because you refused your compliance? Do you want to hear her cry out and beg for me not to kill her? Save me, Violet. Oh, please save me. Richter chuckled and watched as she fell to her knees. Richter, please, she begged. Please stop. But you won't be able to save her, he continued. All you will do is watch as she dies, but you and I know that it will only be the beginning. I will bring her back as my slave, and she will repeat over and over that you failed to save her, that she hates you. She will repeat it for days, months, if I can keep it up. You'll have to look into her eyes and hear her sweet voice sounding so disappointed in you. Violet continued to cry. Even still? Huh? Seriously, Richter said, sighing. I would never be with someone as despicable as you. I'd choose to be with her over you, even if it was her reanimated husk. Even if all she said to me again was that I failed her, that she hated me, that she wished she'd never met me, that she wished I was never born. I would still choose her, and I would cherish every moment I had to look upon her face, even with you making her say those things. I would choose a lifeless, animated corpse of a stupid, half-wit, near-powerless girl over an evil, intolerable villain like you. Richter's eyes welled up, and he clenched his fists together. He held them up in front of him and trembled with rage. If I can't have you, then no one will, he screamed. Violet turned her back to him, crawling over a flower that had wilted and was leaning over. She bent down and kissed it, then sat back up and smiled. Then no one will, she said. Richter drew his sword and walked up behind her, grabbing her hair and stabbing her through the heart. She fell to the ground, bleeding as he walked away. She reached out and touched the flower, straining to see it through the tears. Yours, forever, she whispered as the world went black, and she breathed her last breath. The end of chapter 10. So I'm around chapter 11. I gotta refresh my voice with some water. My nose has been itching so bad today. On and off note, it will not stop itching since I came on. Well, since I really started the stream. Alright, chapter 11. The sound of screeching metal took Amaranthine from whatever that was. A dream? A memory? Amara! Whose voice is that? Am I dead? Amara, are you alright? Oh, thank you for following, Masla. Thank you. Blaine shouted, rushing into the cell and scooping her up into his arms. Friend Blaine? Amara replied weakly. Is that really you? I think I'm dying. Blaine held up a loaf of bread. I got this just in case. Eat. We both know why you're feeling like this, and we'll discuss that shortly, Blaine said, nodding suddenly toward the guard standing behind him. Of course, he's still concerned about keeping my secret. But why are you here? She asked before stuffing her mouth with it as much of the bread as she could fit. Let's go. I'll explain everything once we're out, he said. Out? She asked after swallowing the mouthful of bread. They're ready for me already? The situation has changed, Blaine said, struggling to his feet as he hoisted her up off the floor. Friend Blaine? She asked. Shh, he said, clearly struggling. Once outside, he gave one last grunt, reaching her up into the seat of the wagon. He went around the other side and got into the seat himself, taking them away from the palace and back towards Celeste's home. Are you okay, Blaine? You've had a hard time. You're extremely heavy, and I wasn't expecting it. You must weigh as much as 3 as me. It's all I could do to carry you out of there with a straight face. I think I almost threw out my back getting you into the wagon, he said, wiping the sweat from his brow. Blaine! That's mean to tell a girl she's so heavy. That hurts my feelings, but, sorry, I didn't know it was heavier than a normal girl. Blaine dropped his hand onto her shoulder. Listen, you are a normal girl. That's not what I meant. She nodded. That's very kind of you to say. So, where's Celeste? Are we going to her now, too? I don't know, he said. The situation has changed. I went to see the king, and he and I learned a lot from one another. For instance, the massacre of the necromancers. Amara's stomach twisted, and she felt fear shoot through her body. Sonny's back. What did you learn? The king was told by one of his generals that there was a spontaneous rebellion that had to be put down. He placed his subordinate in charge of that task. At first, he didn't believe me when I told him the version of the story I heard was different. They were just about ready to kick me out, or worse. And then, when I told him about Celeste's being made to do, he called in some soldiers that were injured and sent home from the northern campaign. Most kept their lips tight, but eventually someone confessed. The king, while not someone I would call a good man, at least seemed to value his promises. He was furious to find his own trusted subjects will betray him, and the treaty he created with the necromancers. He immediately struck all their crimes from the record related to the rebellion and decreed that the general and Colonel Nelm would be put to death, and you would place their entire unit on trial one man at a time to determine their involvement. I suspect he's lying in order to convince them to return. I don't imagine he'll let anyone off for this. A king doesn't take this kind of embarrassment lightly. You don't seem to like him very much, Amaranthine said, before stuffing her face with more bread. If I was at all unclear about the fact I despise this man, let me say it outright. His northern campaign has been bloody and destabilizing for both kingdoms. People are suffering because of it. It's been a stalemate for years. He was completely fine with it and still is. His only issue was the necromancers being used in the battle, and the image it might create of his military is weaker and needing using tricks to win. He's right, in a way. There are a few smaller elite units in the northern territories that are terrifying in their effectiveness. Some of them are legendary all across the land. The general in charge must respect them if he believed the necromancers were necessary to win. Well, former general. He won't handle that news well when he finds out. I found out some things too, Blaine. Violet told me. Blaine tilted his head. Violet? But isn't she dead? Amaranthine put her hand on her chest. Part of her is here. We're the same, but different. It's hard to explain. I don't know that even I understand it really, but the way she died. I don't suppose I can convince you to stay at your home while I go after Celeste, can I? Blaine said. No, of course you can't. I'm much stronger than even you because I'm not a normal girl. And I'm glad. You're only one man, Blaine. A monster like me, on the other hand, that only looks like a girl. Yeah, you've got super strength and you weigh a ton. A woman made you and you're in love with each other now. I'll admit, those are all things you don't see every day, maybe even a little bit odd. You are not a monster. At least no more than I am. Being different isn't enough to make you a monster. I don't like hearing you say that. I heard that far too often these past few years, and there was a time when I believed it. There was a time when I would have thought you and Celeste were both freaks, frightening and dangerous. I was wrong, and so are you. Amara leaned over and gave Blaine a kiss on the cheek, causing him to jump in his seat. What was that for? He asked. She grinned. I really need to hear that. Thank you, Blaine. You're a good friend. Let's save her together. Blaine sighed, letting his shoulders droop. Yeah, only problem is I don't know where she is. I suppose we could keep riding around, seeing what direction makes you feel better. But the time you notice the changes, we may already be going in the wrong direction again. Wherever they took her, it's unofficial. I'm almost to the part of the road where the path leads up to your home. I'm strong, but I can't just carry her around for long distances. I'm feeling better, so overall this must be the right direction. Besides, we don't need to use that method. I already have a much better one. Really? Blaine asked, stopping the wagon as they arrived at the path. She hopped down, nearly falling, but steadying herself and testing her strength to step forward. Another step forward, and she remained standing. That's right, I'm a necromancer too. A bit of a unique one, at that. I can bind souls to objects, but also... Wait, how can you be a golem and a necromancer? That doesn't make any sense. But also, she said, raising her voice, I can feel the part of Celeste's soul that's bound to me. The part that she used to create me. I can feel the connection like a string stretched across the distance. I can follow the pull to her. Blaine sighed, rubbing his neck. You know, I won't lie and say that I understand what any of that means, but I'm glad to hear it. If we can track her, we won't have to spend days or weeks running all over the place looking for her. You can get her back by dinner time. Dinner, huh? I suppose you'll do the cooking? Hey, it's not like you ever turned down anything I've given you. Besides, I've become quite the skilled chef in my travels. It's not like I have a companion with me to make my meals. I hope you do one day, she said, smiling. Blaine nodded. Maybe, but I'm in no hurry. I prefer not putting anyone else in danger. Oh, have you noticed the way you speak has changed again? I have. Violet and I are merging in some small way, I think. Not one and not the other, just us and then me. I'm a little scared. Blaine hopped down from the wagon, going to her side and placing a hand on her shoulder. You're always you. We always change. We all change and become other people as our lives go on. We make mistakes and we learn from them and become new people all over again. What's happening to you, you don't have to treat it as anything so much different from that. Just another way you're normal. Blaine looked up the path and back to her. Hey, why are we going up this path if you're not staying home? Would it be better to stay on the road? She smiled. You're rugged and strong on the outside, but the words that come from you are so kind and thoughtful. Seems we're both unusual, just like you said. Thank you again. There's no need for you to come any further. I can take it from here, but like you said earlier, I know there's no point in saying that. Yeah, you got me there. Wasted words. You're just a human, you know. You might die. This isn't my first battle, and I get a feeling it won't be the last. This is a way of life for me. Only the reasons have changed and the scenery. Otherwise, it's just another battle. You still didn't tell me why we're going this way. She smiled. Oh, don't tell me you forgot already. Forgot what? He asked, tilting his head. My present, she shouted, pouting at him. I guess amid all the excitement I forgot. Suppose it turns out I'm surprisingly a good gift giver. She turned and began walking up the path, waving for him to follow. Completely by accident, but sure, the perfect gift given the circumstances. An excellent gift is an excellent gift, Blaine said as he followed. After some time, they finally passed the house. Amaranthine paused for a moment, looking at the garden. The images between the past and the present ran against one another in her mind, and she could feel the merging of the two becoming even more intense. Do you need a minute? Blaine asked. No. Let's go, she whispered, forcing herself to leave the garden behind her. In this moment, she was feeling more like Violet than herself. All she could think about was the garden and that feeling of pain when she was waiting there for Celeste, who never came. Here it is, Blaine shouted, running ahead of her. It's all a bit of a glare in the sun, and sure enough, here the big thing is. He dragged it out of the weeds and held the handle toward her with both hands. Well, I can't carry it. You up to it? I'll have to drag it behind us otherwise. Amaranthine reached out, picking up the weapon and balancing it on her shoulder. It felt heavy, but manageable. She remembered the feeling of cutting down the tree, and more of herself returned. It feels good. We're not far now, she said, adjusting the weapon into a more comfortable position, allowing a smile to appear as yet more of her strength returned. I think I know where they've hidden her away. And that's the end of chapter 11. We're on chapter 12 now. So we're only technically 3 chapters and an epilogue away. So it looks like we're going to be just right at 3 hours, which is what I normally stream. So continuing along chapter 12. Continuing along the path, they reached the rarely traveled road on the opposite end and began walking. You sure this is the way? If that's the case, they must have walked right by it just before we first met. They've done well to keep it hidden, Blaine said. Yes, this is definitely the way. In fact, I can feel that we're getting closer, Amaranthine said, lifting the weapon off her shoulder, though it took some effort. I'm getting more of my strength back. Blaine grabbed her arm, pulling off the side of the road and into the forest. Why did you do that? She asked, nearly falling over as he pulled her. Shh, he said, lowering his voice to a whisper. Look ahead. Narrowing her eyes and using her hand to shield her face from the sun, she could just make out 2 soldiers standing beside the road ahead. Do you think they saw us? She asked. If they did a good job of pretending like they didn't. We should probably sneak into the forest. I can feel many people up ahead. This won't be easy, Blaine, even with the 2 of us, she said, slowly sliding the halberd off her shoulders so she can hold it lower and to her side. You can sense that? He asked, surprised. I do, so I guess I can. It just kind of felt it without really realizing it. I guess it's something Violet can do. I am a necromancer, too, after all. Blaine patted her on the head. Well, that's useful. Good thing we didn't charge right in. So the trip home will be shorter than we thought. Guess that'll give us more time to think about dinner. Hard to believe it was so close where you were. Likely they agreed to allow Celeste to stay near a garden in order to keep her close, Amaranthine observed. Probably right. Makes sense. Listen, at some point we're going to have to fight. But with your ability, I'm hoping we can get right next to the place she's being held, bust in, and run. If they chase us, the soldiers in the capital will attack them. They haven't received word yet of what's happened. I'm sure they will soon. Also, the king said the home is Celeste's now. He's gifting it to her as an apology. As if they would ever come close to making up for everything she's been through. Now she has you, Amara. Doesn't make any difference where you go as long as you're together. Amara nodded enthusiastically. You ready? He asked. She nodded again. All right, let's try to make the widest circle we can until we're as close as possible, he said, creeping through the forest. Even though he moved slowly and was really doing his best to be quiet, he sounded like he was the one who weighed 3 times as much as he actually did. Hey, you a man or a herd of wild boar? Amaranthine whispered angrily. Remember the part where I said we were going to have to fight at some point? Well, it wasn't humor. Do I look like an assassin? I've rarely ever been to a forest before. Not everyone can move like you. I must forgot you were here with me. She suddenly realized that she never had either, and yet, despite her weight, she moved swiftly and silently as a daydream. She found herself fox walking, barely disrupting the earth and leaves beneath her feet, without even a thought of on why or how she was doing it. Something about these woods felt natural and right, but Amaranthine, she likely hadn't been in the woods any more than Blaine had. Sorry, you're right. Besides, she's dead center. They're going to be watching every edge of this place. At one time, an entire community of people lived here. It's nearly a mile to the center from the edge. Should we go back and get help from the king's other soldiers? No, you'd have to go back by yourself so I don't get weak again, and it would take far too long for them to organize. They'll be blowing their trumpets and beating their drums. They might kill Celeste if they had that much warning. I was thinking the same thing, he said, nearing the edge, scanning the area in front of them. Suddenly, a sound came from behind them. Lucky for them, he didn't call out. He was hoping to sneak up behind Blaine for a quick kill. He rushed Blaine with his knife from behind, but Blaine noticed just in time. He grabbed him by the face, covering his mouth. In the same motion, his other hand grabbed the man's hand holding the knife. In the next moment, the man was dead, ran through with his own weapon. The two of them looked around frantically. Thankfully, he had been scouting the surrounding area alone. The forest still hid them for now. Who's over there? Come out! A voice shouted from close by. Well, we tried, Blaine said, drawing his sword. Well, too far away. They'll kill her, Amaranthine said, clenching a weapon and gritting her teeth. She growled, and her eyes looked ferociously intense. Blaine charged forward, running the man through as he moved the bush aside to see them. Another man charged at them, and Blaine kicked him aside, yanking his blood from the other man's chest and running the new attacker through as he attempted to stand back up. Something about the blood was affecting Amaranthine in a way she hadn't predicted. Her vision took on a shade of red, and her body shook. Was it fear? No, not fear. Something else. Don't fall behind, Blaine shouted back at her and snapped her back into reality. Attack! Another man yelled as he turned, peered through the forest, and saw Blaine charging. He turned and ran back toward the camp, but Blaine was quick. He didn't make it far before he caught him and ran him through from behind. Amara! She was having so much trouble focusing. Every time she saw the blood, she felt like she did back at the prison, like she was losing herself and another part of her was assuming control. Blaine, she said, shaking. Are you scared? He asked. Hurry and hide. I'll find her. Don't worry. No, she said, trembling harder now, tears welling in her eyes. I'm excited. I can't contain it. What's happening to me? Just then, 3 other men rounded the corner and charged them. With impossible speed, Amaranthine appeared in front of them, as though out of thin air. She swung her halberd and chopped each man in half through the torso before they even had a chance to scream. Blade was stunned, but fighting is what they came to do. Killing no longer fazed him. It hadn't for a long, long time. He walked up behind her, reaching his hand toward her shoulder. Are you all right? Stay back! Don't touch me! Stay back, Blaine. I might hurt you. She turned her head toward him. Though tears were streaming down her face, she was smiling like a child who received her favorite candy. I taste their life. It's so good I can't stop. Stay back. Help me. No, stay back. 2 more men appeared, and she lunged toward them. They turned to run, but it was too late. And 2 strikes, almost appearing as one, she sliced through both vertically. The tears had stopped now, and her expression was that of a starving animal with the scent of meat filling her nostrils. Nothing but raw desire overwhelming her thoughts and emotions. She wasn't prepared for this. Even with the piece of Violet's soul. Hello! Thank you for following Agent 09. Even with the piece of Violet's soul attached and the desire that created her, all of Celeste's golems had ended up exactly like this, going berserk and dying. Fighting it almost seemed impossible. She couldn't even find a reason to fight it. She needed to kill, after all. What harm was there in sucking their life force as she did? They were evil anyway, right? They deserved it. They deserve it for what they've done. She charged forward, and Blaine struggled to keep up. Amara, wait! She ignored him. He soon engaged with several other soldiers and was blocked from following her any further. She met resistance too, but it was as though she was stepping on grass. Or more like stepping on ants. She could taste their life. With each man she cut down, her mind only swelled with elation and joy. Pure bliss. All thoughts of who she was and what she wanted were forced from her conscious thought. All she could hold on to was Celeste, but even that faded until Celeste's face was no longer attached to it. Celeste became a one-dimensional thought. Go there, save her, go there, save her. Those were the only thoughts she could manage now. She felt around as though invisible tendrils stretched from her mind, seeking any signs of life. She knew there were many more past the building in the center of the camp, and at first she ran toward them. No! Go there! Save her! Go back! Save her! Save her! Amaranthine roared, pivoted, and turned back toward the large stone building. She stomped on the ground as she walked, and it shook like a creature much larger than she was treading it. 2 men were guarding the door, and they shrank back against the wall. No, please, one shouted. We won't stop you. Just go in. Please don't kill us. Some part of her heard them, but that part of her was only a whisper now, and had no control of this body anymore. She smiled, drool dripping down her chin as she stalked forward. She swung her halberd with such force that, besides cutting the men in half, it left a deep gouge in the stone wall. It flung blood across the entire area, spattering and speckling everything with red. All she could feel at the sight was a deep, visceral joy. Find more, crush them, kill them. No, save her, kill them. No, inside, save her. The last of her true self felt as though it was slipping away, like the last drops from a water pail turned upside down. She growled, kicking the door open, sending a hail of splinters in all directions. Celeste jumped to the ground and screamed. The scream excited her, and for a moment she nearly attacked her. But a few drops of herself remained, and she turned her attention toward the smiling man in the room. He stood from his chair and began slowly appalling her. Well done. So this thing was your golem after all. Welcome. You're just in time. That's the end of chapter 12. We're now on chapter 13. Amaranthine held up her halberd and smiled at Richter. Richter looked at Celeste. Oh no, it looks like you've broken another one of your toys. What a shame. You seem so attached to this one. Celeste screamed out, grabbing the bars. Amaranthine, no, not again. I thought she would be different. You thought a failure like you could ever produce something. Amaranthine charged forward and swung her halberd toward him, but a hand slammed through the wall and caught the blade of it before it could reach him. I, on the other hand, produced some of the finest golems to ever be created. Allow me to demonstrate this power. Goff, kill this defective creature. The creature that stood before them was neither man nor wolf. He was a mixture of the two. Black fur covered his body, and his eyes glowed a smoky red. His muscle and mass put him about 5 times the size of Blaine, a large man himself. Amaranthine smiled and drew back her halberd, striking again with the same result. He caught the weapon mid-swing. Goff was the most impressive golem she'd ever remember seeing. She thought Amaranthine's speed and strength would overwhelm any she'd seen before, but this didn't seem a close match. Run, Amaranthine! Amaranthine growled and swung her halberd again. This time when Goff caught it, he threw it through the bars of Celeste's prison and through the wall on the other side. Celeste ran out to her and reached for her hand. Stay back! Amaranthine didn't even know why she asked her to stay back. She had no more thoughts of her own, just the urge to kill. The words were automatic. Richter stepped through the opening in the wall as Goff slammed through the wall behind him, needing a much bigger opening. Wow, I knew you weren't much of a necromancer, but to not even be able to command your own golem? This is unheard of. A new low for the art of necromancy. But at least you can say, for the first time in your life, you actually did something impressive. Even I'm impressed. Your golem actually orders you around. He laughed, and Amaranthine ran toward him again, leaping through the air with the halberd swinging downward. Goff kicked her aside, and she rolled across the ground. Celeste could hear fighting happening further away from them, but couldn't think about what it meant. She just needs more of my life is all, Richter, Celeste said, struggling to her feet before falling back to her knees. He laughed, bending over and slapping his legs. You? Really? Of all the necromancers left in the world, she fell for you. Just look at you. You only have an insignificant life left for yourself. This must be a joke. You are a fool. You are the fool, Richter. She concentrating, feeding vast amounts of her life into Amaranthine. Amaranthine leapt to her feet and charged Goff. This time when he tried to catch the head of the halberd, the blade sunk into his palm, nearly splitting his arm apart. Goff, being the mindless husk that golems were meant to be, paid the wound no mind. He lacked any emotion or will of his own. Whatever he was, or the combination of things he was in his life, he was now a thoughtless slave of Richter. Goff reached out with his other hand and grabbed Amaranthine by the face, slamming her down into the ground. Celeste gave her more. Just give up. I have plenty of light to give, and you have barely anything. The outcome is inevitable, and I'd rather give up as little of my life as possible, he said, feeding some of his own life to Goff. Since the outcome is inevitable, I'll take as much of your life as possible before I die, she replied. You're always in my way, just a stupid half-witted failure of a necromancer. Yet she chose you over me. I'll never forgive you for it. You're the reason I had to kill her. She could have become my queen. Celeste didn't care about her own life anymore. She had loved Violet, and she had never had the courage to tell her. Did he mean to say that she'd chosen her as her lover? She couldn't bear it. To know that she died waiting for her. She could have run away on her own, but she stayed behind and waited for her in their garden. Was it because she had loved her back, after all? It overwhelmed Celeste with grief, but she focused all of her energy on her new purpose. He had taken her love away from her once, and all these years later she'd given her heart to Amaranthine now. She didn't care if they only got to spend 5 minutes together before they both died. She wouldn't allow her to be killed by Richter. He would not have that satisfaction. Amaranthine kicked at Goff's chest, sending him back through the building. She leaped through the air again and swung her halberd in a diagonal arc. Goff kicked himself backwards to avoid the hit, but when the halberd hit the ground, it shook the surrounding area, causing him to lose stable footing. With another jump forward, she swung, this time slicing his arm completely off. As the follow-up swing came, Richter poured more of his own life into Goff, giving him the speed he needed to dodge the strike. He countered and brought his hand forward, grabbing Amaranthine by the torso, burying all his claws into her body. She screamed out, stabbing the shaft of the halberd through his stomach. He froze in place, looking to Richter for his command. Richter had been concentrating more on offering his life force and failed to project the command in time. He dropped to his knees. Stop! You're making me give up too much, he said, pleading with Celeste. I'll give everything, and so will you, she replied, offering even more of her life force to Amaranthine. Pulling the shaft of the weapon from Goff's body, she brought the head of the halberd just as she had against the tree when she had originally showed her strength, lopping off his other arm. The beast stood there armless, looking to Richter for a command. Richter looked helpless. He couldn't decide what to do, and his golem couldn't think without him. Without direct orders, it was nothing more than a statue, just as golems were meant to be. I won't lose to you, so be it. Richter poured immense life into the golem, and the creature's arms regrew. He ran toward Amaranthine with his arms raised. She blocked him with her weapon, and he tried to push him back, but he was so much stronger than her now. Her arms slowly moved toward her own body. Then she went to a knee. Celeste could barely stay conscious, but if she had even one breath left, she would not allow him to kill someone special to her again. Since that day, she had felt such deep rage she kept pushed down and hidden behind her delicate facade. Most of the time it was toward herself, but now she had another target to direct it at. Richter Nelm, and he was going to pay dearly. She continued to pour energy into Amaranthine, giving her the power to stand, then to push back the advancing enemy. Now she had the advantage. Richter, who hated Celeste just as much as she hated him, was now just as focused on victory. He poured more of his life into Goff, and he overpowered her again. Pushing her back, he took another step forward and kicked her away. She landed on her back, dropping her weapon. Celeste was so close. She only wanted to reach out and touch her, just to feel the warmth of her hand one more time. She'd given every drop of life she had left, and it wouldn't be enough after all. Finish them, Goff! Goff took another step forward, leaning down, but a figure stepped between them, swinging his blade in an arc upward. With a roar and a stroke of Blaine's sword, Goff's head fell to the ground, rolling away. His body stood up, straight, stiffened, then fell backwards and onto the ground with a thud. Blaine was covered in blood from head to toe. At first, Celeste didn't even recognize him. How many soldiers had he fought through to make it here? And how much had he survived? Why did he come? Why did he risk so much to save someone who barely knew? Was he even human? Blaine! Celeste shouted. You came! Blaine was breathing too heavily to speak, stabbing his sword into the ground and leaning against it for support. Blood dripped from his face, his arms, and ran down his sword. He certainly didn't look human. No, Richter shrieked, pointing to Blaine. You're just a man. That's impossible. Killed my Goth. I. He clutched his own arms, digging his nails into them. He screamed again, a blood-curdling scream as though he was one wounded. I'll show you all what a real necromancer can do. His eyes glowed, and Goth's head began slowly regenerating. Blaine staggered toward the two women, putting himself between them. He struggled to lift his sword and held it in front of him. Go! Blaine roared. Run! Amaranthine lay motionless on the ground, and Celeste tried, but wasn't even able to sit up. I'm sorry, Blaine. We can't move. Blaine clenched his teeth, gripping his sword with all his might. So be it. He charged toward Richter and swung his sword. Richter fell back, barely dodging the strike. Stop interrupting me! How can you even still move? Richter shouted. He sounded now like a spoiled child who had been cheated at his favorite game, reduced to angry shrieking when he couldn't get his way. Don't you want a rematch? Blaine asked, stepping toward him again. Richter's eyes glowed again, and Goth's head regenerated even more. After a moment, Richter fell to his knees. Goth hadn't been regenerated enough to return and help him. Look what you made me do! You have all nearly drained me completely. I was supposed to be a king. I was supposed to grow old on the throne. Now I'm all used up. You've done this to me, Celeste. You've done this to yourself, Blaine said. Now come quietly and face the justice for your treason. There's a reward on your head I'd like to collect. I think I want to buy a horse before I leave. Richter fell forward, catching himself with his hands, and began laughing. This went on for a while before he finally stopped. Except for you forgot about my unique ability, Celeste. Amaranthine, he said, channeling his own life into her. I command you to kill your master. All right, that's the end of chapter 13. We're on the last chapter before the epilogue. Chapter 14. Amaranthine stood to her feet, then walked to her halberd and picked it up again. In her weakened state, she fought back against the rage that was building inside of her. She felt Violet was partially to thank for that. It was still overwhelming her, and besides Richter's command, she lacked the strength to resist. She stepped forward and slowly swung the halberd toward Celeste. Blaine parried the strike, sending it into the ground instead. Kill me, Blaine, she said, growling. Amaranthine, you must let go of this rage, please, Celeste begged. It's not my rage, it's yours, Amaranthine said, picking up the halberd from the ground again. Celeste gasped. Could that be right? So many of her creations went berserk and died or had to be killed. Was it really because of her? Was it her anger overflowing into them? Amaranthine stepped forward again. Don't make me do this, Amara. Fight it. You can't let him win, Blaine pleaded. It's almost as though my body isn't mine. I can't fight the rage in my mind and the command over my body at the same time. For now I've chosen to fight back the anger, so slow me down. Blaine, you have to kill me. Don't make me do this, Amara. I almost made this mistake before. Don't make me do it again. Maybe if, Blaine said, still breathing heavily. He must have been spent too. He could barely stand. In fact, it shouldn't be possible for him to still be standing. Fine! Kill him first, I command you. He's going to come after me again if you don't. Kill him! Amara swung at him and he dodged under, bringing his shoulder into her chest and sending her reeling on her heels. With the swing of his sword, he attempted to knock the heavy weapon from her hand, but her grip was too strong. She punched him in the chest, sending him falling back, almost into Celeste. Please just run, Blaine. You've done enough. He only wants me, Celeste said, grabbing his shirt. You're just going to give up? Just like that? If you're distracting her with your anger, you need to feel something else. Find a way. I'm not running, he shouted. Celeste clenched her fists together. Why shouldn't I be angry? He took everything from me. He stole Violet, and now he's going to steal Amaranthine from me, too. Amaranthine held her weapon above her head and brought it toward Blade, who had no time to avoid it. She resisted with everything she had and stopped just short. Blaine grabbed his sword and rolled out of the way. I see, so there's some fighting you left. Don't worry, I have enough life left to increase the power of my command. You won't be able to resist it for long, Richter said, giving more of his life to increase his power. His power overwhelmed her again. Blaine ran toward Richter, holding his blade to the side. Richter drew his own sword and staggered to his feet, but Blaine immediately knocked it aside. He held his sword above his head, but had to redirect the strike to parry Amaranthine's incoming blow from his side. Please kill me, Blaine. Don't let me kill you or Celeste. Don't let me. I can't resist any longer. You too, Blaine said. Stop giving up. She swung at him again. Blaine stabbed his sword into the ground, stepping toward her and grabbing the shaft of the halberd. He slid several feet on the ground before finding his footing. He brought his foot up and used the weight to push the head of the halberd into the ground. Using it as a stable point to gain torque, he put all of his strength into lifting it up in the air and her with it. She flipped over, slamming into the ground on her back. Blaine collapsed to his knees, no longer having the strength to stand on his own feet. More! I'm giving you a stronger command and more power. Kill that man now! She scrambled to her feet and wrapped her hands around his throat. Blaine put his hands on her wrists and pulled with everything he had, but he couldn't pull her away. Fight! He managed to whisper before he couldn't speak anymore. Celeste grabbed onto Amaranthine's dress and pulled her to her knees, wrapping her arms around her from behind. Before you asked me if I would be happier if you became violent. I told you no, but I wanted you to know why. Amaranthine loosened her grip, but she couldn't release him. She just delayed crushing his throat for the time being. I loved Violet, and I never got to tell her. I would have given anything to bring her back and let her know how I felt. But there's one thing we know as necromancers. It's that the dead truly remain dead. No one has the power to return someone to life, even if it can seem that way. A fragment of a soul is just that, a fragment. It can offer a glimpse of someone's emotions or power or memory, but it can never become them. You are still you. Do you hear me, Amaranthine? You're mine. I love you. I don't care what that sounds like or what anyone thinks of me for saying it. There really is one thing stronger than my anger, and that's my love for you. You promised you would be mine forever. Will you please keep your promise? I don't care what it takes. I'll die with you. They're going to execute me anyway, Richter said, laughing. He poured even more power into his command. Now let go of the man and kill the woman who loves you. Let her feel what it's like to be killed by the one she loves. Amaranthine turned around, wrapping her hands around Celeste's throat. Oh no, Blaine, stop me! Blaine fell to the ground, reaching for his sword. He was still moving, but he was too slow to stop her in time. It's okay, Amaranthine. I won't give him the satisfaction. I will still love you to the very... She couldn't speak any longer, as Amaranthine's grip tightened around her throat. Celeste reached her hands up, putting them around Amaranthine's throat and pulling her close. As her face turned red to purple, she brought their lips together. Amaranthine's battle with Richter's command finally reached a stalemate. And then, after a brief moment of being equal, she gained the upper hand with her power, letting go of Celeste, allowing her to fall to the ground. Did you think my power binds souls to life force only went as far as my own soul, Richter? She asked, rising to her feet and turning toward him. He coughed. Wait, Violet? What? I can't believe my life. You're draining it away. Before it's gone, I'll use my command, what I have left, to hold you in place and do it myself. He staggered over to the sword, picking it up, and stepped toward her. He gained speed, shouting as he held his blade toward her. Goodbye, Richter, and good riddance, she said, slapping his power even faster. Blaine ran into him, impaling him with his sword, then letting go, falling to the ground again. Richter looked down at the sword and laughed. Funny, it looks like you've won our rematch. As the last of his life drained away, he fell to the ground, dead. Amaranthine picked up Celeste from the ground, looking into her eyes, and kissed her. But how did you... I should be dead by now. I had only a sliver of life left, Celeste said, touching her lips. As a last gift, given to us by the man who hated us most. Forgive me for using my dark power to eat his life for us. So you had powers too. You're a necromancer. That means you're... I'm me. You're you, Celeste said, resting her hand on Amaranthine's face. I love you. Blaine crawled back over to his sword, retrieving it and placing it back into his scabbard. I need a bath, he said, lying on his bath. Wait, did you kill everyone here? Amaranthine asked. Hardly. After that big wolf thing showed up, most of the soldiers ran away. They're going to be a surprise waiting for them when they get back to the capital. In fact, we could just rest here for a while. I have a feeling someone's going to be here soon to pick us up. Why did you stay, Blaine? Why did you risk your life to help us? Amaranthine asked. You said I was your friend, didn't you? Amaranthine was stunned. Yes, you are my friend, but... Well, I don't have many friends these days. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever really had one. Besides, you two really remind me a lot of the other two women I knew. Magic was involved, and I almost chose to go to the wrong side. This is also making that up to myself. Don't go acting like you owe me anything. You don't. In fact, after this, I intend to purchase that horse and head north. But there's a war going on up there, Blaine, Amaranthine said. Could you maybe stay around for another couple of weeks? Celeste asked, speaking softly. Blaine sat up, frowning. Is that how long you have left now? Celeste nodded, putting her arm around Amaranthine. We'll need someone to bury us in our garden. I'm sorry to ask something like this of you after you've already given... I'll do it, Blaine said, wiping his eyes. Just please don't say another word about it, all right? Amaranthine wrapped her arms around Celeste in return. Thank you, Blaine. Blaine turned his back to them and said nothing, wiping his face. The sound of horses came from a distance, drawing steadily closer. Soon a unit of gawking soldiers arrived, unable to believe what they were seeing. The three of you did all this? The commanding officer asked. Yeah, Blaine said, rising to his feet and placing his hand on his sword. So which side have you come to join, the living or the dead? The men looked at one another, their eyes wide. We came to assist you, Sir Blaine. The king has made you an honorary knight of the kingdom. You may call him your own king now. He's offering you land if you wish it. Perhaps even tell your king to shove it. Everyone gasped, looking even more shocked than before. I mean, he sighed before continuing. Tell him I respectfully decline. You can give us a ride back to Celeste's home and we'll call it even. Same goes for us, Amaranthine said cheerily, leaning her head on Celeste. Just a ride, please. If that's what you wish, then it would be our honor to escort you back, the officer said, before several men dismounted to help them onto their horses. He stopped short of Celeste, saluting her. Congratulations on your victory, Congratulations on your victory, Madame Necromancer. If there's anything we can get you, for whatever time you have left, please don't hesitate to ask. Celeste smiled. Thank you, but I have everything I could ever need right here. Amaranthine smiled, and they hugged each other tightly. And that's the end of chapter 14. Now we got the epilogue. Are we ready for the epilogue? The epic epilogue? Probably a very sad epilogue. Alright. Epilogue. 2 weeks later. I must look terrible, Celeste said, wiping the sweat from her forehead. That's odd. You look beautiful to me. Is it just me that looks terrible then? Amaranthine answered, smiling. You look wonderful, Celeste said, smiling back. I'll get you some more tea since I can still get around pretty well until you get too weak to sustain me. I'll be right back. No, Celeste said, grabbing her dress. Stay with me for a while, please. Hold me. Amaranthine frowned. Is this why you asked Blaine to come by this morning to say our goodbyes? Celeste nodded. I'm sorry for deceiving you. I just wanted to see you at your happiest for just a little longer, because that's what makes me happiest. Celeste. Yes. These last couple of weeks, we certainly have the garden looking wonderful, don't we? Celeste nodded. We do. Most couples don't have the benefit of setting up their own grave. We're quite lucky that way. Lucky? I think that's the word I'd use too. That's how I feel. Every day with you these last couple of weeks has felt like 1,000 years. Celeste sat silently, looking at the flowers in the garden. Her vision was blurring now. Celeste? Hold me? Celeste asked. I'm sorry to be selfish, but could you maybe hold me instead? Consider it my last wish. Celeste smiled, putting her hands on Amaranthine's shoulders and slowly bringing her head into her lap. This is the best, she said. I'm so happy that I met you. Celeste reached down, running her fingers through Amaranthine's hair. My life isn't recognizable from before we met. I was so lonely and angry. I repressed all those feelings and tried to look elegant instead. Because of you, I could put so many awful things behind me and tie up so many loose ends in this life. I could have never have done it without you. Look at me, please, Amarantine said, placing her hand on Celeste's face. I want to feel your eyes looking into mine. Celeste grasped her hand and held it to her cheek, looking into her eyes. That's the easiest thing I'll ever have to do, my dear. Celeste, yes? I love you, no matter what happens once we're gone. If there's a place we go, or if we're reborn in some strange land, or simply become a part of the earth and feed these beautiful flowers, I'll always be with you. I'm yours, forever. I love you too, Amarantine. I love you with every single piece of me that there is. Amarantine smiled, and her smile seemed to linger there for a moment, as her body slowly fell away into dust. Celeste squeezed her hand until it was gone. Where Amarantine's hand was only a moment ago, now nothing remained. She was gone. Celeste smiled and lay down on the ground beside her. Thank you. She closed her eyes and was surprised to find that she wasn't feeling sad or afraid. The last thing she felt was an intense, warm happiness. Blaine arrived nearly an hour later and found them there. He was glad no one was around to see him cry this way, as he carefully placed them into their grave together and followed all their instructions. He had never been much for gardening, but he gently pulled the flowers from the potted plants they had prepared for him, like it was one of the most important things he had ever done in his life. And he treated every task with respect and care. Once it was done, he picked up the tea off the table. It had a note under it with only his name. It had grown cold, but he enjoyed it all the same. This was not the first time he'd buried someone, and he sadly suspected it would not be the last, but rarely was there any joy in the event the way these two had treated it. He had seen couples less happy on their wedding day than Celeste and Amarantine on the day they were prepared to die. It affected him in a way that he couldn't quite put into words, and he almost felt it had made that part of him right. He had found his purpose in life. Not something so shallow as winning duels or serving rulers, but something with true meaning. Maybe if he could follow that path to the end of his days, he could wear a smile on his face in his death, like the one he found Celeste wearing so proudly. He left a small amount of tea in the cup without finishing it, then poured it over their grave. There you go, girls. Now it's like we shared it together. I'll be leaving today and traveling north. I promise to carry your lessons with me wherever I go and put them into practice helping others. You taught me, Yamara, that sometimes a smile from someone on a cold, lonely night is enough to remind them that a life is worth living. What it means to be called a friend by someone. And Celeste, you taught me how to forgive myself for my mistakes and enjoy the life that's in front of me for whatever time I might have left. Goodbye, and thank you for everything. Mounting his horse and taking a few steps forward, Blaine stopped, giving the garden one last look before riding away. The end. Actually, we did that in like 2.5 hours. I guess after all, we don't have time to play Final Fantasy XIV, but we'll be playing it tomorrow. Did you all enjoy the story? I know some lurkers were in and out. If you enjoyed the story, or if you only caught the tail end of it, or the beginning and you're just now returning, I do have the Amazon link pinned to the chat, so you can always click on it. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, I think it's free, right? Let me double check that. Yeah, Kindle Unlimited is $0, or it's $3 to buy through Kindle. It's $13 to buy it on paperback. I personally prefer paperbacks. I don't know why, but I have a hard time reading on Kindle. A real hard time. It's awful, man. I think it's just my eyes. My eyes don't like to focus very well, so they just don't. Thank you, Mr. Brogas, for the applause. I'm here 4 days a week. But I think I'll read A Kiss of Iron and You next month, like at the end of the month again. Because I had always intended for my streams to have like a different stream, at least at the end of the month or beginning of the month, sometime during the month. And then that kind of fell to the wayside a little bit because I don't know why it fell. I guess I was trying to make my physical art a little bit more successful, and so I guess guess you could say I was having a rough time with life at that time. So I was trying too hard to split myself off into too many directions. I'm still doing that, but I think I'm getting better at managing things. Maybe. I also know that until like March or whatever, I had started only doing long streams on Saturday and Sunday. And so that made it a little bit harder for me to think about things that I was going to do once a month because I had so many games and so much art that I wanted to do. And it was just hard. But anyway, if you're interested in the Tales of Love and Magic series, book 1 is A Kiss of Light and Flame, which we read like 6 months ago. So if you follow the link in the pinned comment, you will find this particular book, but you can also go to Mr. Brogath on the author and click on it, and you can also see his other series. Not only can you see the rest of the series in this book, which there is, and of course the complete collection. Yes, there is a complete collection. It's an omnibus, and it does have art that I have personally done for the books. I did not do the covers, and there are also a couple of extra art from the artist on Taba for the complete collection. And if you choose to order, I think we have like 1 book left through Mr. Brogath. If you decide to order it through Mr. Brogath himself, we also have some printed art and some cool things to send. So, you get like a little 8x10 or something like that of a random book cover. So, and in the omnibus, all the book covers are, I've got 2 left to sell, I think. I think they're like $70 plus shipping, right? But those also come signed. And if you would prefer to have signed individual copies, you can also contact Mr. Brogath through Twitch or on Twitter or on his Discord to order individual copies of books, and he will sign them and send them to you. But the omnibus also has all the individual cover art. It's just in black and white. It's really, really cool. I like it. And it's got all my watercolors that I did for everybody and a special scene. And there's also a cute little kind of like epilogue to finish everything. So, if you've read the first book, you may know what it is. But I'm not telling anything. I'm not sharing any secrets. Okay? But anyway, I'm glad you all joined me tonight. It's been a lot of fun. I think I definitely need to go rest my voice now. Doing the villain voice so deep and gravelly. It's not completely worn me out, because obviously I'm still talking, but it did wear me out a little bit. So, definitely going to be doing that. Wow, there is not a whole lot of people online today, but we're going to raid Atsumori because it's been a while. And Mr. Atsumori has actually been inappropriately flirting with Mr. Brogath. So we need to go in there and like tell him what's up, right? Actually, he can probably just. Mr. Brogath is a rabid raccoon, so you can have him anyway. If we're being totally honest. At least I won't have to feed him anymore. He's too much of a raccoon and he gets into my trash. Somebody else can let him have his trash. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and read Hatsumori. Oh, there we go. We had to wait for my keyboard to come back on. Is that a hand slap? Raccoon slap? Oh, judo chop. I see you're also learning how to use Kofuhara's emotes. Maybe this relationship is deeper than I think it is. There's something I should know about. Yeah, he gave me that power. There's something I should know about. I don't even know if I had that power. That's okay, I got the power of fire. Mr. Boga, prepare a raid message. I should do, actually, since I take TKD, and I'm a half red, half black belt, I should totally do some, like, Anna Belinda, like, martial arts emotes. I should do it. I gotta do panels, though, too. So, I don't know. Maybe we'll do... That would be cool. Yeah, that totally would be cool. Because, yeah. Maybe... Oh, I should do it. Oh, I should do it as, like, a goal for getting to go to karate college. Which I know that I'm already going to get to go to karate college. I think I have, like, exactly $164 left before karate college is completely paid for, like tuition and all. So, in the hotel. So I'm going to be trying to sell some physical art lately, but I do have commissions open if you would like to commission some art. And, you know, if you want all the links down below, or if you would like to donate, I do have a Ko-Fi, a coffee. Oh, and we're gone. But goodbye, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow.